Well then, hello world, we're live. Hi, haven't seen you guys in a while. But
Yes.
you didn't think it'd be that easy, did you? No, I have things to say. I'd like to start by responding to, actually, no, a little intro might be necessary. So yes, this is the ex-pod layer, or at least parts of the ex-pod layer team. Um, I was in the practitioner program. Not only was that, I was actually, I would argue, third in command. I was the theory instructor. So I was actually given a lot of authority. I'm not really just some guy who's saying what I'm saying. I was there during parts of the early inception of the overall theory. Thomas likes a lot to make the point that I wasn't there at the beginning. And while that's true, I would argue that's not really relevant because I'm there argue enough for it to matter. Because I was early enough to see when he was still MBTI. That's a thing. A lot of my points are predicated around that. A lot of my points are predicated around that I actually witnessed a lot of these ideas coming into being. Um, so that's a thing. Ben also has been in the practitioner program. Uh, both of us have done a lot of work that we've contributed to Podlayer, been in forms of actually engineering software and maintaining the website. I also helped construct the website, built the forum, and what have you. So I guess what I'm saying is we're not just some guys. We have a lot of experience with this theory. We've been very immersed in it, as Thomas likes to say, for a very long time. For me, the years of 2009 to 2015, I was still actually in close physical contact with the core team. So Thomas, Shailene, me. And 2000, I left the Hangouts. In about 2015, I altered my arrangement to only remote meeting, so just Hangouts only. And then 2016, I dropped out entirely. So there's a lot of backstory. This is a lot of this is very dense. And the primary point of this video is actually to respond to Thomas's response to something of mine that came out. So the story behind that is that there was an email that was circulating that was originally written by me to Alcides, who was another person who was following Podlayer at the time. And it was a private email. So Thomas referred to it as a strident critique in his thing, as if it was meant to be, I'm a critic and I'm criticizing him. No, that was really just me being frank, being what I felt was honest and transparent about my experience in an environment, in an email that I felt where it would be safe to be honest.
Yeah.
And
Like,
yeah, so, Thomas kind of likes to spin this like, oh, what a fucking asshole for having shitty things to say. But it's like, no, you weren't. Technically, you invaded my privacy by reading that email. I'm actually just being frank in that email. So yeah, the fallout of that email circulating around, it kind of went viral in the Cloudflare community, was a discussion, actually, a very honest and for once forthcoming discussion came about in which people can actually finally stop walking on eggshells and talk about what they've actually been feeling and noticing over time without worry that anyone in the team or Thomas himself is going to try and put a stop to that or put some sort of social pressure or ostracize that person in some way. And in response to that email, Hello? Are we actually still live?
Yep, you're back.
Cool.
Yep, I think you froze.
In response to, oh, what the hell? Okay. Okay, and so in response to that video,
I think you froze again.
There's 2 frozen Demuses. All right, I see you.
not sure why I keep getting kicked out. I got a feeling it's about to happen again.
I see 3 versions of you in the call. 2 of them are frozen. Okay, 1 just left.
Yeah, those should drop soon.
And now that one's frozen too. I can lower my video output so it doesn't.
All right, hopefully that won't happen again. Okay, shouldn't. Anyway, all right, so in response to that, people had things to say. So they actually shared their opinions. And Thomas just dropped a video bomb of responses, just customized responses of like every single person, even things that really didn't matter that much. Like, I'm surprised he, even addressed like multitasking, for instance. It's, okay.
Yeah, he felt like he needed to give a personalized response to everyone.
To every single person, yeah.
People who are just like casually making posts in the Facebook group, he felt like he needed to make like a very personal response to those people.
Yeah,
and very, very angry responses I might add as well. People who are just sharing their thoughts in the Facebook group. That wasn't even a pod layer Facebook group, by the way.
Right.
We actually made it to indicate,
hey,
this
it
is
never
not
was
a pod layer Facebook group. We just invited them over there in case they wanted to talk to us. And he's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. But then he actually joined and then he joined, responded to everyone, and then said, so nope, I don't want to talk to you on Facebook. So,
yeah.
I was just before this hangout taking some new notes from his original video entitled Critique of Pod Layer, where he was responding to that email specifically, and just comparing his energy in the 2 videos. Because in the critique, he's like at least trying to come off reasonable. So he has this very meek energy where it's like, well, I believe it's true. And then in these videos that he's just like, fuck everyone.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, just completely cynical, just does not care about the fact that he's very clearly coming off as a dick, very clearly demonstrating everything we're saying about his character to be true. So I'm kind of thankful that the mask is off. He's not really trying to hide his true colors anymore.
Yeah, I mean, one quote from him, like, I can just pull out here. He was, well, I mean, there's many points throughout these videos where he's basically like yelling at us and like screaming and saying like that we're like snowflakes and stuff. But then something particular that caught my attention was he actually said, "You fuckers can't read very well at all." Like, he just blurted that out. Like, it was addressing everyone, by the way. It's like, all you fuckers can't read very well at all is basically what you're saying.
Right. And the thing is, that was actually never anyone's point. No one is arguing that they don't see certain patterns. They're arguing what those patterns mean. That I see this, and we're going to call that Xi, which means that their whole energy is structured a certain way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so he always goes back to the point that it's like, you don't see it. It's like, well, fucking neither do you. Like, you cannot claim that you see a theory. You don't see a theory. You see patterns that you're calling equals a theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be the main disconnect here.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you see it. I mean, and so there's like a couple of things. There's like, I mean, well, actually, there's many things. I mean, like there's no like number of things I can say are the only things. I mean, Thomas says that a lot. It's like there's 3 things to this. I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. It's just, but But anyway, like I guess one thing is like this he treats it as like a black or white thing, right? Like if you either see it or you don't see it. You're either you either see the phenomenon or you're just retarded, I guess. So I mean, there's that. So if I say because like in a couple of my emails, I was like, you know, I think that I think that this, you know, could be completely wrong. I have no idea if the theory is true at all. And I also said, you know, I do see it, right? And he thought that, oh, you're just contradicting yourself. No, I just have a complex view of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Like I feel like I can see what you're saying, but that's not necessarily the same as agreeing with you on everything. It's also not necessarily the same as completely disagreeing with you on absolutely everything, or not being able to see what you're talking about, right?
So. Yeah, the thing is, like, actually, I'd still say I'm pretty good at predicting what Thomas's reads are going to be. Because at the end of the day, that's what mojo reading is, or that's what being good at mojo reading is. Can you consistently predict what he's going to say the right answer? Because remember, Thomas is the one who's deciding what right answers are. And so the more you know him, the more you know his associations and his lens, his locus of experience, the more you can reliably predict what he's going to say. That doesn't mean you're seeing it. It just means you're getting a bit better at playing this game that he created. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it is a game. It does have rules, and you can use those rules. What's that?
The greatest game. I remember early on that term being used, and that's what it was. Just all a fucking game all along. The game is, can you guess what Thomas sees? And that was the criticism. That was the feedback coming in the comments that was causing a lot of anger on the pod layer end of things, and they were right the whole fucking time. Is that the game is just fucking rigged.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's very easy to be the best at a game when you're the one when you're the referee, you're the one inventing the rules. So, you know, at the end of that greatest game video, then he's like, ha 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 ha, I have higher reads than you, and then it's like, yeah, but they don't know what the rules of the game are. Yeah. You know, you can't just be like, I'm the best at baseball, and they're like, what does ball one mean? Like, you take no pride in beating a person at a game when no one but you actually knows what the rules are.
Well, except in this game, the referee
is a player.
Can just change the rules all.
Yeah, the
referee can change the rules while the ball is halfway up in the air. The referee, like, oh nope, that's not high enough. Just like before the play is even over. You know, it's just so arbitrary. The way it was done.
Yeah. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to start getting into, okay, so first I haven't actually given a response to his response to the criticisms of Pod Layer video. So that's been due for a bit, and I'd like to start going through that. No one?
Close the Hangout window.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, you guys were talking about like how it's like completely arbitrary. Yeah, I mean, like there's really no no way of knowing exactly what he's talking about or like what he's referring to when he says you know, the words and the cues he does. Because I mean, like the thing is about like, you know, all these typological models, whether it be like MBTI, the Enneagram, or Pod Layer, is they all use like terminology that is so vague, like you can't know for sure what they're referring to, like no matter what, like no description of the of like no MBTI description is ever going to tell you specifically like what you're supposed to be looking for. It gives you, it's vague enough that you could apply it to many different people, many different situations. I feel like the same applies with the cues. Like you could apply the cues to many different situations and scenarios. And I think that's precisely why you can't falsify, is because you don't really know like when the words and the descriptions and the powers and so forth are true and when they're false for any given individual. So it just becomes a game of predicting, you know, what is Thomas's like way of looking at people, right? And it's like, you know, there may actually be some truth to like the way he looks at people, but it's just about converging with his way of looking at it. It's just his model, his understanding of
his
people.
particular center of experience.
Exactly.
Like that experience is more supreme than everyone else's, even though you're a single human being. Your experience can't possibly be better than another person's experience because it's different. They have holes that you still need to, they can fill holes that are unfillable for your experience because you just didn't live that life. You just don't have that relationship. And especially like, he's kind of limiting himself from even having real relationships with people. He lives a hermetic lifestyle. The only actual close relationship he has at this juncture is Xylene. And that's a very weird relationship. He calls it dear friends, but it's like, no, dude, dear friends don't believe one of their friends is a supremely higher authority than they do. That's some weird other shit that you have going. I have dear friends. That weird power dynamic does not exist in any of them. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so yeah, I sort of want back to, I'd like to address some of the points that he raised in his response to the criticism of their video. He addressed both me and Ben. I'd like to address both of those because he said mouthfuls in all of them. Okay, first thing. So he comes clean finally about the fact that he couldn't possibly have been reading at 100% accuracy. All right, so here's the thing about that. How many of you knew that was bullshit from the start? How many of you actually cringed every time you heard him say that? Literally all of us. We all cringed. Yeah. We all knew it was bullshit. Why the fuck did it take you 7 years to learn that? Why did it take you 7 years to admit that? Why was it that, why did you need to be backed into a corner to be honest about that? Like, he wants to play this part of an honest person, and he'll be like, oh, if I'm not honest, why would I announce my purifications? And I'll address that point later. But like, you can't just be like, I'm honest in one instance, therefore I'm honest in all instances. No, you are writing off of the false authority of this idea that you're never wrong for years, even though you knew it to be true. So think about that. You're okay with writing off of people making assumptions that you misled them with when you know you misled them. It also brings another important point. So I'm going to kind of set certain precedences, and these are all things that he's kind of admitting his point, but it makes my overall case. And I'm basically working off of points that he's demonstrating himself in that video. The first one that I need to point is that, okay, so he admitted that he has demonstrated that he often needs to delude himself, create delusions just to give himself confidence. That's an important point. I'm going to be referencing that a lot. Yeah, more things to say about the 100% accuracy. You argued that he felt like he had 100% accuracy. Okay, first of all, it's not possible to feel like you have 100% accuracy. That statement is nonsense. 100% accuracy, that is a statistical number that can only be arrived at through statistical data. It's not possible to just feel statistical data. You actually have to do testing to derive that kind of information.
And speaking of which, he has no way of testing himself.
Right.
Because he can only the only way to test your mode reading accuracy is relative to him, and he cannot test himself relative to himself. Even if I mean it's just like the most bizarre thing, right? Because like we don't know if he's right at all. So it makes sense for nobody to test him relative to him because we don't know if he's right. But he thinks that like at the end of the day he's going to reach a point where he can say, oh, I've reached data bedrock. I've completely
he's just deciding, yeah.
And then suddenly that'll mean that, everyone will be able to measure themselves scientifically.
Right.
He's never going to get there because it's impossible to measure yourself relative to just yourself. That's circular, right? It's like if you're testing yourself and saying those results validate yourself, you're validating yourself. You're not being actually tested like by the outside world.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, his only point is going to be, my spirits tell me that I've reached data bedrock. And you've already demonstrated that your spirits are often fucking morons. Like, your spirits told you that you should tell people that you read at 100% accuracy. Did they not? Okay, your spirits are fucking full of shit. let's see.
And like, what about my spirits? Like my spirits were
Yes.
like, get the fuck out of here.
Yes, and no one else's spirits matter but his. Yeah. So
My
back
spirits.
So like one more thing that I want to bring up about the 100% thing is that like it's not only dishonest to say that you're 100%, because later on he corrects that and goes, okay, so maybe like 95%. No, you're still lying. The answer is I don't fucking know. It is impossible to test that. It is not possible to have that information. Any claim about your accuracy that is not I don't know is a lie. Which brings me to the next point. Thomas. Okay, so precedent number 2, aside from he needs to. So number 1, he needs to delude himself just to give himself confidence. Number 2, he's okay with lying to you about what he actually knows. At the very least, he's okay with misleading you about what he actually knows and telling you that he knows things that he cannot possibly know. He's okay with that, and he's demonstrated that.
Like this is the greatest discovery ever. Like for example, even because like I mean, more recently it's been like, oh, you know, I gave up the 100% thing. Okay, but then you're also saying it's the greatest discovery in the history of humans. You know, without any evidence at all that you're right.
For what it even is.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know? Like, people made a big deal about the human genome, mapping the human genome, and like,
what about the human genome?
That has way more merit than this ever does. But it's like even mapping the human genome wasn't as big of a deal as they thought it was.
He's like, I think I found the programming to the human psyche. And it's like, didn't we already like find the human genome? Like when it comes to innate nature, the programming of your innate nature, isn't that the human genome? Isn't I mean, okay, like there might be more to it than that. I don't know, right? But like, I think we've already found programming to innate nature already, dude. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
okay, so going on with his explanation of why he felt it was correct at the time to say that he had 100% accuracy. He said, my Roja reading signal was strong. Your opinion of the mojos of the first samples has changed many, many, many times over. And most of those changes actually occurred at the beginning. So you just invalidated your own feelings of confidence. So a lot of your argument is predicated on confidence. In fact, all of it's predicated on confidence. You very often make the point that I feel very strongly about X, or I believe X is the answer. Okay, but you've just established the precedent. Your confidence is fucking irrelevant. You've demonstrated so many times that things you feel strongly about are still wrong. Because at the end of the day, feeling strongly about something isn't the same thing as actually having truth.
Yeah, like his own personal feeling about like how right he is isn't evidence, right? You might be able to convince yourself like that you're right that way, but you can't convince, like you're not going to be able to convince others that are actually being scientifically minded about this. You know, through that.
Yeah. Okay. He goes on to say that because reading the first pop culture samples came with obstacles, and so he got a magic modifier from fucking Skyrim or something. He made this really weird, I don't know if you guys remember this, but he made this really weird point where it's like, you know how sometimes in video games you can like boost your archery level to, but what the fuck does that have to do with anything? Like, why does that apply to you? Like, why would how does this come out of your mouth and you don't hear how ridiculous that is? Like, you literally just cited magical thinking and said, I thought this was true because magical thinking.
It's just an analogy. It's not.
Right.
It doesn't make you right. You can't. It doesn't actually prove your point. It's not a valid premise for you to say like, oh, because of archery or because I'm kind of like there's some things that are similar to like researchers, but really I'm not an actual researcher. I'm not actually doing science. Then that means, oh, I'm doing research and I'm completely valid in the way I'm doing things. No, it means that you can just be compared to those people in some respect. It doesn't mean that like you're like everything that applies to what you're comparing yourself to actually applies to you.
All right. Okay, so the next principle that he kind of made was about the confidence of his original reads and how well, I think we all saw it. We've all seen how like there's just a shit ton of Naiji, and all of a sudden it's like just kidding, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding, and Nijai, and then all of these kind of just got changed. And by admitting that you had to kind of use these mental crutches to give yourself this false confidence, you're also admitting that like your reads weren't even based on physiological cues. And I kind of witnessed that myself being around. Like I saw that he would often do a lot of projection, a lot of projecting himself onto people. And he would be like, I relate to this person, so they're an IG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was kind of obvious in the beginning, like there were like an absurd number of like Naiji and Nijai and stuff. And it's like we found out later that like the vast majority of those, you know, I'm pretty sure actually the vast majority of those have been turned over, like like over the years with all of the changes that have been happening. I mean, they've been, you know, I mean, they've been like incremental, but over like 5, and a lot of them haven't been incremental. Like sometimes there's been like just this massive wave of like changes, but like over the years, like there's been so many samples that have changed. I'm pretty sure the majority of the database just a few years ago is like completely different than it is now. So
certainly, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I kind of intend to go back to a lot too, because it's pretty important. Okay. All right. So at this point in the video, when he kind of goes on to talk about that, he now acknowledges that kind of deluding himself and believing he has 100% accuracy is a mental crutch. And he's figured that out and he's now corrected himself. I'd like to ask, when did exactly that occur? Because he loves this argument that's like, I'm a changed man now. I'm different. I used to make mistakes, but I don't make mistakes anymore. Okay, like when exactly are these changes taking place? Are they changing like mid-conversation? Because he tends to go from acting like he's in many times in this video, then he admits that these things that he's telling himself are wrong, but then he just goes into this downward spiral of blowing himself up with, if this is true, then that means it's the greatest discovery ever, and that means
he actually said that like if because I think Gabe, you talked something about the body types on like Underground Temple or something, or Underground Temple. It might have been the new Facebook group. They basically said if that if those body types correspond to mojos or something, then that means like this is the greatest discovery in the history of the world. But actually, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could just be like
it's like where the fuck did you make that leap? That is just a massive leap. I said, okay, I see these kind of body templates. I didn't say anything about what that possibly means. It could be anything psychologically. I mean, I see these cues, but it's like all or nothing. You either accept 100% of it as like just theoretical guessing, or you're just an evil apostate who needs to be burned or something. You know, there's no real middle ground on this.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure like whatever body type research that was, I'm most likely that probably people have been thinking about that much longer than Thomas has. So
the Greek humors I mentioned in there.
Yeah. So that kind of seems to indicate that you didn't really discover it then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just been shit that people have been looking at for.
Honestly, coming at it from the lens of I see interesting body types in people, I'd like to try and study this. That is a much more clean and clear-headed way of coming about this, instead of I need to convince these people to join my cult, so how can I sell them on this? You know, that's always the way that he's coming at this. You know, like,
and
you like to play a researcher on TV, but no, at the end of the day, you're trying to make a case that you can use to people that you could get people to open up to you, so you could inject your worldview into them. At the end of the day, that seems to be priority. Even this whole concept of, oh, no, I'm going to have different degrees of Podlayer. No, you're prioritizing selling it to people overall. Like this idea of like A-class samples. So you're restricting the data that people are looking at to make a more sellable case. That doesn't make it. that's not evidence for your case, though. It's like just because,
and he actually said that was evidence. Like I talked to him and he said that was evidence. And that was my whole critique with the cherry picking is like, if you're saying that's your evidence, like people looking at A-grade samples and getting good results, people looking at very small number of samples, like not actually I checked, it was like 9% of the database. And people, and those being like the ones you expect people to get right. Okay, then congratulations, you predicted which ones people would get right in your own model. That doesn't mean that this is a species-wide phenomenon. If you can select a few that you think people are going to get right, and they do, that means absolutely nothing. In fact, it's cherry picking. If you think that's actually evidence, if you're using that as your actual evidence, you are cherry picking. That's confirmation bias in your sample pool that you are.
No, Ben, it's front loading. That's the term he says. It's not cherry picking, it's front loading.
Why is that like, better?
You can like teach people that way. I'm not criticizing it as like a teaching methodology.
But he's not there yet. He's not at that. You're at the research stage. You're not at the teaching stage.
Exactly.
We need to come up with like more effective ways of training your practitioners. You're still changing your answers fucking monthly. Like, you're not at that stage. You cannot claim to be at that stage. I'd actually like to kind of skip ahead and just address the things that he said to me now, because it's occurring to me that it's going to take a while if I want to address every single thing that he said to you too.
Sounds good.
Maybe I'll do that in some other venue, but
yeah, I'm sure we can.
I think I probably have to move along here.
Yep.
Okay. I love this one. So he's responding to something that I quoted Al-Kidi saying, where he's like, "I'm not floundering. You said I'm floundering." And it's like, well, technically that's Al-Kidi's words. This is my words, but I still agree with it. Yeah, I do think you're floundering. And his argument is like, I'm not floundering. I'm wrangling the truth of natural like a fucking crocodile hunter. And yeah, it goes all over the place, but that's the nature of wrangling the truth. Okay.
Tree tripping analogy, bro.
But why do people have to fucking level up in a system that you made up and like memorize lines about theory that is being made irrelevant by the purifications and that you're also backtracking from? So you've been wasting people's time with stupid shit. You're constantly changing the answers. There's actually no, so his argument is, I'm not floundering, I'm progressing. No, you're moving. There's no evidence that you're progressing. Moving answers is not the same thing as moving forward. It's possible to just move. And there's no evidence that they're actually getting clearer. In fact, you're seeing symptoms of the weird shit that happened in the beginning, which was, like, for instance, Niji and Nijai, and like Nizai and Izzy and stuff, were bloated. There's a shit ton of them, very few of everyone else. Now that's happening with Z9. So you're seeing the same things where it's like specific mojos are getting massively bloated and holding an amount of diversity that makes the peak pathway irrelevant. If it's possible to have that much diversity, that much ways of living life and doing things, then why the fuck should I care about peak pathway? Like, it clearly doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I
find it
loses explanatory path.
So yeah, okay. Okay, next he says, saying I'm making this up is like saying I don't believe in the mojo phenomenon, and I do believe it, therefore I'm not making it up. All right, so this is very topical because Ben just brought up the false analogy. This is a false analogy. No, saying that you're making it up is not the same thing as saying that you don't believe in it. Do you know why? Because at the end of the day, everyone makes up shit. All theories are made up. That's how it works. That's what a hypothesis is. You make something up, you throw it at the phenomenon, you test it, and you see what sticks through things like prediction and experimentation and stuff like that. That's what the scientific method is. So to claim that you didn't make it up is just stupid. Of course you made it up. The point is not whether you made it up or not. The point is whether you are doing anything to test the claims that you're making, the claims that you are making up, which you certainly are. The point is whether the data actually supports these claims. And they don't. And the fact that you're kind of just stacking more things onto them, yes, You're making it up as you go along. You demonstrated in this response video, you are now backtracking. That's making it up as you go along. One day you said inspirational is the highest authority. Now, based on the same amount of little data, you're still saying, you're backtracking to, okay, maybe not exactly like that. That is making it up as you go along. That's kind of the definition of it. You're changing your answers as, A, people put pressure on you. That's kind of the most relevant thing that's happening. And B, you're changing your mind about your reads, so your ideas are fluctuating. I would say, yes, that's making it up as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, and he's like, I mean, what he often does is like when people criticize the fact that he's like, I mean, he's floundering, he's changing his answers all the time. When people criticize him on that, what he'll often say in response is that, you know, this is how scientific research is done. I'm just changing, I'm improving. But the thing is, like, if you're a scientist and you're changing your answers, you're going to be changing those answers in response to the evidence, in response to actual testing. He isn't testing, right? He's not
falsified. Yeah,
you can't because the words he uses, like, you know, the like emoting, nobody really knows what that is, because nobody can falsify what emoting is or what any of these cues are. He cannot test his assumptions, which means that he cannot do scientific research. So he isn't a scientist, right? It's like the unfalsifiability is making it so it's literally impossible for him to do testing. So at the very least, he should acknowledge that instead of claiming that he's actually, because he's giving off the facade that he's actually a researcher that's improving, but he's actually not doing any research to begin with. He's just changing his answer.
It's not possible to falsify. So you can't claim that you're falsifying and getting someone in the face of better data emerging. It's not like you can do repeat experiments. You can't do repeat experiments if the only person's opinion that matters is yours.
Yeah. Yeah, and he, like, in his response to me, he complained that, like, I said you can't falsify or tell, you can't tell what spider hands are, is basically what I say. He's like, well, did you you know, did you mention longness, is what he said. And I would say actually longness, how, like, your hands being elongated is actually a vague term. Like, yes, people have some idea of what that means, but like some people's hands are in some ways elongated, in some ways they aren't elongated. So it actually is vague whether their hands are elongated or not. And by the way, elongated is not actually something that determines mojos. There are many people who have elongated features, who most people would say have longer features in general, who are objective, who are, you know, who are not subjective mojos. Right. So that means it's not even a cue. It's just a correlation that happens to exist in the categories that he's constructed.
Right. That's I actually had a point addressing spider hands, so I'll actually just throw that in now. At one point in his response to me, he says, if spider hands are a thing, then I'm pointing out something wondrous that connects all Ziny throughout history. Okay, so here's the problem with that claim. Spider hands don't actually connect Ziny in the present, let alone in the past. The whole concept of like any cue, things like spider hands, is this weird circular logic shit where if they were read as a Ziny, automatically they have spider hands. It doesn't fucking matter what they look like. He just says, oh, they're read as a Ziny, they must have spider hands. But the problem is, these hands don't actually look alike. Okay, so look at my hands. It's entirely possible that these hands were the original prototype of spider hands. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but it's very likely to be the case. These hands do not look like Magnus Carlsen's hands. These do not look like Alan Rickman's hands. So you cannot claim that all of their hands look like mine. Some of their hands look like mine, and I don't give a shit about that. I didn't need you for that. I didn't need you to tell me that my hands are long and skinny like that guy's hand. I can already tell that. That doesn't help me in any way.
Yeah, the thing is, like, to show that a model is inconsistent. Like, another thing he said is he actually accused me of cherry picking. You know that dude, that Zenai dude I posted in Human Qualia. Thomas accused me of cherry picking because I found an example of a person who I thought, you know, was like, I just used that person as an example to show a point that, like, I could very easily claim that guy has emoting going into his eyes, even though he's a freaking Xeni, and it is entirely unfalsifiable. Like whether I'm right or wrong, you cannot test like whether I'm right or wrong on that, despite the fact that like he's somebody you claim has a logic based power as their source power.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, if I'm attacking your theory, I can find individual examples and show why your theory is inconsistent. I don't need to actually go out and analyze every single sample to show that you're being inconsistent and that your model is unfalsifiable. I can find one example and show that your model is unfalsifiable. I don't need to look at every single example.
Right.
And furthermore, I'm not defending a scientific theory. I'm not doing scientific research. So your claim that I'm cherry picking doesn't even make any sense because I'm not claiming anything about what's actually going on. I'm just critiquing and poking holes in your model. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so next point to address he makes is, he says, making it up sounds like it is a conscious, willful effort to make it up, but I'm seeing it. Oh, okay, I kind of skipped it. Well, let me start with this one. Saying I'm making, no, actually, I did cover that. Okay, so he continues on to say, making it up sounds like it is a conscious, willful effort to make it up, but I'm seeing it and my spirits are giving it to me. Okay, let's break that down for a second here. I'm seeing it and my spirits are giving to me. So anytime he says, my spirit said X, just translate it in your head to, I had a thought, because that's what it is. That's what a fucking spirit talking to you is. They're just thoughts. Can we please stop pretending like fucking angels are talking to you? You have thoughts. You're not that special. Secondly, saying I see things and I had thoughts about things is not addressing where you actually got your theory. Essentially, you're just claiming, I just pulled it out of my ass. I just made it, well, or not just made it up. I mean, the logic is basically like, by my spirits. So I saw it and just gave me little voices just gave me facts of life. Okay, so two things to say about that. A, things don't work like that. There's no really evidence that people just get kind of these magical, like, there's exactly only 16 types of mojo. Oh yeah, I do see that. Also, like, if a voice in your head told you that, why would you just believe it to be true? Just because you heard a voice in your head say it doesn't mean it's true.
I mean, that's where popular theory came from. Like, you know, right. It was all his spirits, and he's like, the easiest way for me to reveal my grand theory of the world is to start with mojo first, and then he's like, you know, I have scientific evidence that shows I'm right about everything. Right. My spirits told me like many years ago. And then when people say, you know, oh, it's unfalsifiable, it's like, you're not looking at the data. You don't know how to see humans as strongly as I do. You know, even though he has no proof, like any way test his own model, which is just model. You know, it's not actually what's going on. It's just it could be very limited. You would have no way of knowing it. So
yeah. Which brings me to point number 2. Okay, no, your spirits didn't just give it to you. It's fucking MBTI. I was there. I saw it. And there's evidence. There's dude, we have like forum posts and stuff like that, man. Like, you can't escape this. You can't get away. You can't just, no, my spirits told me, dude, come on, there's a pile of evidence. It's not just my word against yours. There is clear evidence that this is taken from MBTI. You changed the fucking names, and I was there for that. I was there for the name changing. When the meetup groups were dominant intuitives, or not dominant intuitives, but like intuitives of Long Beach, you were speaking in terms of MBTI. The theory was in itself MBTI. This whole shit, this whole psyche location, Leonard fucking Thompson. It's still pseudoscience, but it's Leonard Thompson's pseudoscience. And you just ate that up. So if you're going to say now that this isn't Jungian, this isn't MBTI, why was Leonard Thompson an authority on this? If the only people who are authorities on this are you, because you're the only ones reading Mojo, why was she an authority? Why did she get to say that such and such pod power is related to such and such location of the psyche, which is a nonsense concept, by the way. The psyche is not local. The whole psyche location thing, that's just a way to like mental gymnastics himself into saying that he's always been right along. Because I don't know if you guys know this. Back in the day, they used to say something like Xi is located on the right side of the brain. Not the psyche, the brain. And that was kind of just repeated for a good while. And I actually remember the watershed moment when me and Mitch are like, okay, can we seriously stop saying that? Because our critics are gutting us out there with that shit. We have no evidence for that. We need to stop saying that.
Because the thing is, if you say the brain, then like your claims are gonna have to be tested, right? Like you're gonna have to be tested. Mm-hmm. We're actually kind of studying that, and we can kind of tell, like, you know, we should. I mean, if there really is this, like, you know, power, like it literally is located in a certain quadrant of the brain, and it's fundamental to how we work, I'm pretty sure we would have. You know, I'm not saying like we necessarily would have, but I mean, just like, you know, just like Occam's razor, I'm pretty sure we would have found it by now. So, yeah.
Yeah. So then he goes on to say, Ademus didn't make it up with me. I was working on the theory and basically had it already before him. Right, but you were still making it up after you met me, though, too. And you still are now. So, like, this weird, like, what? What do you mean you had it in place before I met you? You don't even have it in place now, let alone before I met you. So, dude, I helped write the fucking Power Flows, man. I helped write about Zai and its relationship to Z and stuff. There's videos of me, like, talking about it. So you gave me creative reign to make shit up. And I wasn't making shit up. These are concepts that I only had as abstractions, mostly influenced from my days doing MBTI. I was very much still thinking of, like, Z is TE, Xi is TI. So these are Jungian concepts that I was kind of saying what I believed, how they worked and shit at the time. So yeah, dude, you gave me creative freedom to make things up. And I did. And it didn't stop me. At no point you're like, hey, that's not based on very strong data. Like, it had to be me to say that in this email. Like, it had to be me to tell Acuitas, by the way, don't take those videos very seriously. They're not based on any data. I was there. I know for a fact they're not based on data. Why was it me that needed to say that? Why? It should have been fucking you. Okay, so next point. He says, in not necessarily these words, but to summarize, I saw things. It is putting itself there, as in, like, the cubes are where they are, and I kind of just saw them, and, like, so the theory just inserted itself in his head. So he continues on to say, I'm seeing the story that I'm telling you all. Okay, no, you're not. You are not seeing a hard cap on only 16 types. Only 16 types. You're not seeing that. Okay. This whole 16 type model,
like if you're writing like a I don't know, like a logical proof, like, right. It's very hard to say, like, that you found all examples of something. You know, right. I mean, it's very hard to, like, count the number of examples. Yeah. But what you can do is you can find a counterexample and just, like, fuck somebody's hypothesis up just with one counterexample.
Yeah.
So it's so yeah, actually I'd say it works. It seems to work the opposite with, like, how he's sort of thinking about and conceptualizing it. Whereas, like, if he can just, like, count up, like, a bunch of, like, people that seem to make sense in his head and have, like, very, like, no evidence whatsoever, and, like, that qualifies as like doing scientific research. Mm-hmm. But, like, when if somebody don't, like, but what he's claiming is, like, if people don't research it to that level, then they have no right to argue against them. When actually, yeah, somebody can actually find one example and say, I'm really not seeing what you're talking about, right. And really, like, describing what you think you're seeing and showing how that's not really the same as what you're seeing. Like, somebody can legitimately do that with one sample and have that be a pretty damn good argument against your theory that there's, like, this fundamental human math that's, like, right on a person's face.
Yeah, these, like, forces that are keeping people within these certain parameters.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, back to this whole, like, I'm only seeing 16 types. Okay, no, because there are riffs, and riffs are variation, and you don't actually have any evidence that those riffs that you're calling, oh no, it's different iterations of the same thing, are they? How do you know? Like, what have you done to actually test that? There's variation within specific types, but you came at this with the foundational bias that there must be 16. Where did that come from? Myers fucking Briggs. It couldn't have come from anywhere else. Please stop. Please stop acting like angels gave it to you. We all know that can't possibly be true. So you started with the foundational bias. There must be 16 types. Therefore, I need to fill 16 buckets. And then you proceeded to fill 16 buckets with people. And then you're like, ta-da, I did it. I found all the 16 types. No, dude, you just filled 16 buckets. Why am I supposed to be impressed with that? And when I could see that these patterns don't even
Yeah, and it's like
aren't even consistent.
Though, yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of inconsistencies, and it's like, yeah, I mean, there's some things that seem like they're generally internally consistent, but even if like the model is 100% internally consistent, it could be fucking completely wrong. Okay, like even if you have perfect 100% internal consistency and he reaches quote unquote 100% accuracy, it still could be fucking completely wrong. It wouldn't prove anything, because making something internally consistent doesn't actually prove as right. Because in your limited like world where like if you define the logic to be a certain way, and it kind of makes sense if you don't look at anything outside of it, then it doesn't show it's actually true. You need to actually test it in like the outside world. You know what I mean? In a scientific way, in an empirical way. So
yeah, seeing physiological cues is one thing. Claiming that you're seeing shit that's happening under the hood is a completely other thing. So he's coming at this with the logic of basically A equals B, therefore B equals R, in which you're saying, okay, so I see these physiological patterns. I call these physiological patterns, let's say, G. That means it's blah, 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 social awareness, da, 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 da. You can't just take this, your mouth looks like this, and then say, you experience this kind of psyche, or you don't experience that kind of psyche, because the nature of mojos is also exclusive. If you have G, you can't possibly also have Jai. So you're making these claims that it's like you experience this and you don't experience that, when that can just be refuted by people's experience. All a person has to do is be like say Jai user would be like, no, actually I do use my mouth to move people in conversations and stuff like that. Like I can actually see what my mouth is doing in my mind's eye. So
yeah,
I don't really think there's anything to that. Like, and I'm sorry, but your point has been refuted. If a person could just say, no, you're wrong, I actually do experience that. Like, what really do you have?
When someone points that out, he doesn't really have a good response. You know what I mean? He's like, well, that's just like the nature of it. It's not like literally what it means.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then why don't you change your model so it actually makes sense? It doesn't like fucking mean something it's not saying. You know what I mean?
Or we'll do kind of a circular logic thing, or we'll be like, okay, let's take social awareness for example, on like a giant Z user. He'll be like, so they have social awareness, but they're using Z to be socially aware, and they're using Jai to like move people. So it's the same effect, but it's different. How
so
do you
what's
know? Like, it's only different because you just decided it's different. That's circular logic. It's different because it's different. But at no point have you actually demonstrated that person is literally experiencing something different. Okay. He goes on.
Yeah, I mean, and like, this is probably definitely a tangent, but I'm pretty damn sure at one point he did say he was like the smartest man on the face of the earth. I don't know for sure, like my memory is kind of foggy. I'm pretty sure he said something like that.
Yeah.
So now he just calls himself a mega genius. So he's basically saying he's like 0.00. Well, I don't know exactly what percentage, but like at least like 0.1% or lower of the population on the bell curve or something. So he's basically saying I'm way smarter than all of you.
Which I'd like to touch up on and say one thing. Smart people don't actually need to go around saying they're smart people, right? Like, name one genius in life that ever goes around being like, I'm a mega genius. Please believe that. I'm a mega genius. I'm really, really, really smart. The only person I know who does that is Donald Trump.
I mean, and like the guy, I mean, the guy struggles very heavily. He admits this. He struggles very heavily when it comes to logical sequencing, when it comes to memory and so forth. And I'm not saying like you can't be a mega genius and struggle with those things. There are people who have, are very smart in many ways who have weaknesses. I mean, that's very, very common, right? But I mean, if you're claiming to be if what you're claiming is that you are a mega genius when it comes to your scientific research, but your like main struggles are with logical sequencing and memory, that seems kind of unlikely, doesn't it? That like
deal breaker.
Yeah, I mean it's because you're saying you're a mega genius like in that area, but like you're your main weaknesses, or at least some of your main weaknesses, are logical sequencing and memory, which are pretty important when it comes to scientific research.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure we've made some really good points, that pretty much directly show, in fact, they do directly show that you aren't actually doing scientific research. Mm-hmm. So how can you be a mega genius if you how can you confidently claim that you're a mega genius if you aren't even doing scientific research? Okay, actually, no, you can claim that while not doing scientific research. But how can you claim that you have found the greatest discovery in the history of humans, and it is from your scientific research project, and also not be doing scientific research and also be a mega genius? That kind of sounds like something a mega genius wouldn't do.
Right.
So I'm just going to point that out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna move on to his next point where so his words were, you said the theory was made up before the phenomenon was made up. No. Actually, yes, it was. First of all, the first several waves of purifications were complete overhauls. Literally entire mojos were gutted. Zybe is one example of that. I don't know if any of you guys were ever around this early, but there was all these people like Clint Eastwood that were Zybe that had since gotten moved. So the entire collection of Zybe at that time was just gutted and moved to Naiji.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
I do remember that.
At least I do remember Clint Eastwood for sure.
Yeah. And so also at this point in time, at this current point in time, every sample has moved around at some point or another as it has changed so radically from when I first came on board. So you can't actually argue that the phenomenon was already discovered before the theory was made, because the phenomenon could not have possibly have been captured back then if you needed to do such extreme overhauls of all of your samples. Yeah. Those samples were objectively garbage. If we're going to pretend, so let's entertain this idea that the current sample base is really the higher samples, they're really the more true samples. Okay, that means you didn't have that at the beginning. So there's no argument that you can make that, we didn't make up the theory before we saw the phenomenon. We saw the phenomenon, then made up the theory. No, because these samples, Mojo as a whole is so influenced by what the samples are now that back then it was just something completely different. So, but the theory was in place because it was Myers-Briggs. It came from Myers-Briggs. So Myers-Briggs was in place. And the samples were basically filling up these buckets that Young and Myers-Briggs had already preconceived. And therefore, ideas of what these mojos are supposed to look like were driven by Myers-Briggs concepts. For example, the Z and I concept, it's very easily traceable to ENTJ. INFJ and Naiji are a little bit weirder just because when Thomas typed himself, he got typed as an INFJ, he kind of dumped what he believed was his identity into that. And so the concept of Naiji is very much this carrier of Thomas's identity. And so it has all of these things that relate to him that totally don't apply to other people that he's calling Naiji.
Yeah, and I kind of want to bring up a possibility. It's never actually considered that a person might be more Naiji than somebody else. Nobody even thinks about that, because
that's
the theory just makes that assumption, and people eat it up and believe it without actually testing it, and they don't have it tested to begin with, as we talked about it. But isn't it pretty obvious that some samples just look more like one mojo than others? Aren't the media grades kind of showing that some people do kind of more obviously look like that sample than others? I'm not saying this has to be the case, but the fact that nobody's brought up the hypothesis that some samples might be more of a certain mojo than others is kind of, I think, a little bit ridiculous, considering we have all these different media grades, and Thomas is openly admitting that it makes a huge difference whether a person is one grade or another.
Right.
So yeah, I'm gonna, I'm just gonna hypothesize, that some samples are more of a certain mojo than others, which kind of like undermines the idea that everyone has like these fundamental innate cognitive configurations. And then
Right.
Thomas is gonna have no way of disproving it because there's no way to actually show that the cues or the powers or, that they mean anything.
Yeah, or with innate for that matter. Like if it's possible to be more of one mojo, then it's like, is it possible that like the life path you chose kind of carved you into that creature more than it has others that you share a label with?
And this gets into stereotyping too. I mean, like there's some people that apply more to a specific stereotype than others, or at least they seem to, right? So you could very easily make an argument that like, this is stereotyping, and that's why some people seem to apply more to one mojo than other people. Or at least largely stereotyping is involved, right?
So the next thing he says is, first time I saw the phenomenon was me and Jilene in the kitchen in our house in Maryland, and I was talking about how her face is doing things. I was talking about her Jai. No, you weren't. That's not possible. Jai didn't exist yet. You were talking about introverted feeling, weren't you? Because you were doing Myers-Briggs back then. We've discussed this. This is a thing that I'm not just making up. You had Jilene and all of your friends and family take Myers-Briggs tests back in Maryland. You've talked about this. The word and standalone concept that is Jai was never even coined until after I was all on the team. So it is literally impossible for you two to have been talking about Jai. And it's interesting to me right now that you have absolutely no problem equivocating FI and Jai when you're constantly trying to escape the idea that MBTI, or that the theory did come from MBTI. Okay, then he goes on to say, when we met early on, we didn't get, he's talking about me. And he's saying, when we met early on, we didn't get deep into the theory. Yes, I did. I was the fucking theory instructor. Of course we got deep into the theory, even early on. People, I love this.
You're doing a way better job of teaching the theory than he is.
This is so good. Okay, this next point.
He's a theory instructor.
This next point that he makes is my favorite out of all the bunch. He goes, people came from typology town, and I corrected their reads. How am I doing that? But what do you mean you corrected their reads? Okay, so that's a mouthful to address. First of all, no, you didn't. That's logistically impossible. You've already made the point that you need a robust virtual village of thousands of samples to actually have reliable reads. You didn't have the sample base back then to support accurate reads. You could not have possibly corrected their work. Secondly,
like the MBTI is also unfalsifiable, so you can't test them either.
Yeah.
You literally cannot correct them because they're unfalsifiable. You can't show that they're wrong. Same goes for you. You can't show yourself wrong. Nobody can show you wrong because nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A second point to make on that, are you seriously suggesting your reads of all of those people in typology town are going to be the same now as they were back then? You read almost every single person as either a Ni-IG or a Ni-Jai. Think about how many purifications involving those two have occurred since then. Your lens has fundamentally changed since that time. There is no possible way those reads would stay the same. Maybe some of them, but not many. Most of those Ni-Jai bloggers that you read as such back then would probably be read now as Z9. Is that not correct? Also, you just did it again. You did the thing where you equivocate Mojo with Myers-Briggs despite the fact that that's not supposed to happen. They're not supposed to overlap. MBTI is personality. Mojo is supposed to be energy. That's not personality. So you're taking two things that don't overlap and then saying, I corrected your work. No, dude, you're not there. It's two different things, and you just accidentally admitted that it's the same thing. You keep doing that. Okay, next he says, I already had an...
I don't want to interrupt you, but he does flip-flop a lot. Like, even just recently, so before, it was 5 degrees of Podler practice, right? We're talking about, when you see the cues, You're seeing the configurations and what's going on in their head. Okay. So then he's like, very recently when I was like talking about like my criticisms, he was like, there's now 6 degrees of pod practice. We're going to split the mind from the physicality. And he mentioned that in his pod criticism video. Even then, I still think that like, okay, this is slightly a bit of a tangent, but I still think that like even if you go to 6 degrees, you still have to reconcile the fact that you're claiming there's these logical structures like they come that like on a person, like that there's these logical configurations of powers and stuff. And like just being able to see cues doesn't actually show there's like a logical configuration that applies to someone. But then he changed it back to 5 degrees of pod practice. Like in his most recent videos, there's 5 degrees of pod practice now. So he changed it and then he changed it back, which I think is a pretty classic, that's pretty classic flip flopping. And he does that a lot. Like he'll go in a particular direction and say, I think I should do this with the theory. I think I should do it like this. And it, people naturally change their minds a lot about things. But the thing is, this is supposed to be a scientific theory. So when you change your mind, it should be based off of testing on evidence.
Right.
But he's not actually doing it. He's just changing his mind because of his opinion. And it's like your personal opinion shouldn't decide how you change your model of the universe. It should be it should be evidence and scientific testing that updates your model.
Okay, so he goes on to say, I already had an idea of what each mojo looked like in my head before then. Once again, not possible. You didn't have the same sample base you do now back then. And also, it's not even possible in the first place to have an idea of what they're supposed to look like in your head when you haven't even done research, when you don't even have samples. How does that work? You're invoking some weird magical thinking where you're like, my spirits told me exactly what they look like. First of all, no, they clearly didn't because you've been changing your answers since then. So that can't possibly be right. And secondly, that concept makes no sense. In order to know what something looks like, you actually have to gather instances of those samples first. You can't just magically know what something looks like. Next, he says, Alcides and Darius always looked like the way they did, like pilots. And at that time, we had less data on Sinai, and now we have more. So he's kind of explaining his reasoning for why we'll update his roots, I guess. And I think he was responding to the way that I said that it's only obvious in hindsight, that it's only obvious what their mojo is in hindsight, and that is a fact. Exactly. Technically, it's not even obvious.
Yeah, it's not really obvious. We just can if you believe he's right, and you look at the data, or the data, well, it is data in the sense that they're pictures, but not in the sense that it actually shows that he's right. But yeah, you look at the samples, and you think that Thomas is right about his theory or whatever, you're probably going to see things more towards his direction by doing that. I mean, that's a placebo. It might not be 100% placebo, but yeah, I think there's definitely placebo involved there. Then on top of that, like even when people go and they look at it, like people don't even know for sure if you're right. They can just see it to the extent that they think that you're right. Just thinking that you're right doesn't actually mean that you're right. It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't. There's no derived knowledge or evidence that actually proves that you're right based on what the person is looking at. So the person doesn't actually have any certainty. They just think that you're right when they look at it. Those are two, very completely different things. It's very easy to convince somebody that, you're right by showing somebody something that kind of looks like it makes sense. But it's much harder to actually show somebody something and have that person be able to determine, factually that is the right answer from the data.
Yeah. So to continue on, thank you for making my point that you didn't have the samples to logistically pull off an accurate read back then, and that you weren't actually reading based on physiological cues. However, there's more to it than that. There's a point of ethics that need to be made. Back then, with Darius, he didn't just give him a read as Naiji. He gave him life advice. You told him he was overmodulated. You told him he was stress locked, and that he's like over logicking and chilling himself down. You told him he was a fucked up person.
Yeah, I think Thomas really has to take responsibility for that, because that is just like you're basically claiming that somebody is doing their life wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And you did that for years. When we went to Typology Town, you claimed that like so many Naiji were like overmodulated, like there was something wrong with what they were doing, because they were doing a lot of like too much
because
logic.
They're contradicting his claims technically. Like, you're not supposed to contradict what I say about you, so you're fucked up.
Yeah. And by the way, many of those people, under Thomas's current understanding of humans, would probably be completely different mojos. So you could have just told a bunch of Zenai that they're fucked up for using a bunch of logic or something, very easily. And I think you really have to own up for that, because that has an impact on people. Like if people, especially, people actually, spend a lot of time with you, actually, believe that you're right, people will legitimately believe that there's something fucked up with them.
Right.
So.
And that was actually the selling point of Podlayer at that time. It was very much kind of like an insurance pitch where it's like, you better buy this hurricane insurance. You don't want to lose your house to a hurricane. But in his case, it was, you better know yourself because you don't want to fuck yourself up. And the only way that you can know yourself is to know your mojo, which is to believe in my opinion of it. And so you made this claim that not only do you have like 100% accuracy reading, but that you are this highest authority. You claimed that the theory was fully fleshed out from the get-go, that you can base your life on this, that you not only can, that you should, and that if you don't, you're in a dangerous position. You are emotionally manipulating people based on shit information at the very beginning. If that's not unethical, I don't know what is.
Yeah, like the fundamental premise, that he just spreads everywhere that he's doing research, like that this is scientifically valid, like completely fucks everything up, because the first degree of Podlayer practice, like everything, he's claiming that everything rides on that, and he's claiming that is scientific, that he's doing scientific research. So people are actually believing that you're doing scientific research and actually basing their lives, their life decisions, who they date, what career they pursue, based on your fucking ridiculous, stupid claim that you're actually doing scientific research.
Right.
So it's extremely dangerous to claim that and then have people believe it and then build like all these other claims on top of it that have to do with people's lives and relationships. So.
Yeah. So he goes on to say, you say there's too much authority invested in me, and I understand that. No, I really don't think you do understand that. Here's why. Okay, so it's already bad enough when a single person has 100% authority over saying what totally subjective patterns are and how they should be acknowledged. You've also already demonstrated that you're arriving at your reads largely based on your personal locus of experience. And your personal locus of experience is missing a tremendous amount of information, especially because of the fact that you live in this hermit lifestyle where you don't really have any close relationships other than Jylene. And so you can't really see these relationship dynamics you're talking about actually play out because you're not really experiencing relationships in any way that we're experiencing relationships. So the only thing that can fill these missing gaps of your experience is other people's experience. You cannot claim to just have this highly superior lens when you still have a limited experience that can only be facilitated by other people's experience. Secondly, to make the situation worse is that you're also a malignant narcissist who has deluded themselves and tell themselves all kinds of fantastical stories about themselves just to give themselves the confidence to wake up in the morning. Not everyone suffers from that addiction, right? Literally none of us need to do that. It's just you. And you've demonstrated many, many times over that you need to tell yourself all kinds of that your need to tell yourself all kinds of fantastical stories actually hurts your ability to read clearly. You've already admitted that you need to delude yourself into believing something as absurd as reading at 100% accuracy just to give yourself a confidence boost. And you're clearly still showing that you have this case of just compulsive boasting, where you're just randomly spewing out the delusion of grandeur. So you're still doing this. It's not really a good thing to have an autocratic single authority who's clearly suffering from serious mental illnesses and has already demonstrated that these affect his reads and his ability to perform as a researcher. Third, to make things even worse, you have several conflicts of interest that actually keep you from seeing clearly. One of them is to preserve your fifth gear. So this whole idea of preserving fifth gear is basically a way of justifying never criticizing Thomas. Because if you criticize him, you fuck with his confidence, and if you fuck with his confidence, you fuck with his fifth gear, and therefore you fuck with his reads. So you hide yourself from any kind of influence or thinking that's uncomfortable to you. And due to the fact that you're a narcissist with delusion of grandeur, any reality that doesn't validate you being a mega genius boss hero who's saving the world is an uncomfortable influence to you and fucks with your fifth gear. Also, you have another conflict of interest in which you already claim to be a mega genius guru with 100% accuracy who is saving the world. So now you're also distracted by trying to preserve people's confidence in you. A real researcher would never put themselves in that position. This is an idiot position to put yourself in. You should have never have gone public and trying to get people to start basing their lives on your reads if you're not even done researching enough to actually get good reads on people. Luckily, I've set a lot of people free from that position. You're welcome. Also, you're trying to start a cult. So that's another conflict of interest. That's probably the worst conflict of interest at all. You keep insisting that people need to swallow your worldview and basically be converted into your way of thinking. And you're coming at it from the point of, how can I better sell that to them? You're not coming at it to, how can I make sure my research is as clean as it can possibly be? You're coming at it from, how do I make people invest more confidence in me?
Yeah, and it's really funny, right? Because it's really easy to sell the idea that you're doing scientific research somewhere. Like, people generally think highly of scientific research, but like all these years you've been defending your theory, right? Your model. Like, your model has stayed pretty much the same all these years. Your reads, what you claim is the data, has changed completely, and your model has stayed pretty much exactly the same as it was. The website is pretty much exactly the same as it was. The marketing is pretty much exactly the same as it was. Okay, maybe you're making some changes now. There's like another website now, but it's still like the Podler website is still marketed and still contains pretty much the same content it has for years.
Right. And that is now irrelevant.
Yeah, and yet it would be really fucking easy to just completely get rid of all of that and just say that, hey, I'm kind of looking into these like patterns in people. Can you like tell me if you think you're seeing something like this? Like, if that's all Podler was, that would be fucking easy. But for some reason, that isn't what Podler is. You're creating like this grandiose theory of everything that isn't supported. Well, first of all, even if the physiological cues were scientific and were falsifiable, it wouldn't be supported by it anyway. But so it isn't actually supported by that. So like it literally doesn't make any sense. Like the whole idea of like at all levels, like the first degree being scientific, like that doesn't make sense because it isn't scientific, it's not falsifiable. And then like the levels after that, they have to do with spirit forming. Even if the earlier levels were true, those wouldn't actually have more scientific validity because there wouldn't be any way to test those either. So yeah, right. It's just it's all speculation and just coming up with an idea, basically making up, a theory or idea of how stuff works without actually testing it or proving any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so at this point, he starts addressing things I said about my personal experience. And so he says, talking about me, he says he lost a lot on Podler, etc. And I can see that if you don't see the data. All right, first of all, this word, the data is bullshit. It's just your opinion. So can we please call a spade a spade? And also, yes, I have seen those. I have seen your opinions. I've seen the samples, and I'm actually not impressed with these conclusions. Not only that, I've tried to apply the theory in my life, and it actually fucked me up more than helped me. It didn't work. It created confusion that shouldn't have been there in the first place. It made me uncertain about a lot of things. It put my relationships in jeopardy. I lived the immersive pod layer experience. You know, I was one of the close core teams. It sucked. It's a horrible existence.
I feel a lot better, by the way, after leaving. Like it was, it actually felt
infinitely better.
I basically like slaved away, by the way, for like over a year. I slaved away like 6 to 8 hours, like every single day of my life, into it. And I thought, like, at first I was like, oh fuck yeah, I'm coming out with like the sample surfer, and this is like this revolutionary thing. But that was basically just like a buzz because I felt like I was doing something influential. And then after that, I was like, I don't fucking like this. This lifestyle fucking sucks. And I dealt with that shit for like many months. And this is probably the same shit that like Thomas experiences every day. He probably you know, pumps himself up every day and says, "Oh, I'm doing the, you know, greatest you know, research that like humanity has ever seen." And he probably tells it to himself. And he probably needs to convince himself to do all this stupid shit.
Yeah.
Because
this is podler morning prayers.
This lifestyle is fucking terrible, and like it's really obvious when you're doing this work that like you really don't know if anything you're doing is worth it. And I'm not saying like in order to commit something you need to know it's worth it, but like there's no evidence for any of it. So like, why should anybody be putting any work into what you're doing? If you have if you're claiming you're doing research and you don't have an ounce of evidence, why should anybody bet anything on what you're doing? Like you might be able to convince some people who are just that faithful in you, but you're not going to be convincing people who are really being skeptical of the fact that this guy is just saying that like he's doing the greatest research ever without actually showing any actual research.
Yeah, there's also a lot of unspoken things that kind of buying into the immersive pod layer experience. There's a lot of worldviews that aren't really talked about that also kind of fuck with you in a way that shouldn't be happening. There's also kind of this idea that like everybody else in the world is a zombie except you, and you're this island of enlightenment. And so it kind of trains you to hide from people. And that's a kind of thinking that currently Thomas and Jillian, they still very much apply that kind of thinking. That's why they barricade themselves in their apartment and aren't really capable of forming any kind of advanced relationships because they have this idea that if you don't agree with them, you're fucked up, you're a zombie, I don't like you. And you're kind of trained to think like that too. It's a horrible existence.
Yeah, you're trained to think like, because you're basically saying, you know, without evidence, by the way, you're doing the most important work ever, you know, for humans, for humanity. So that basically implicitly means that everyone else, what they're doing is fucking dirt. And then you, as a result, you end up treating people like dirt.
You end up being like condescending asshole to them. And we so totally were. Like people pointed that out to us all the time.
And that's exactly what Thomas is doing to us right now. Like he like, you fuckers can't read people very well at all. Like he said that right on camera, and he's like yelling at us and screaming at us. He's like giving you the cold shoulder, even though like he was apparently your friend for like years.
I think it pissed him off that I made him wait.
He told me directly.
That's my interpretation of the situation. That's why he didn't really want to address anything I said. Well, also because he probably couldn't address it. Like he acted like I didn't say anything worth addressing. No, dude, I made a lot of solid points on the Facebook group. You know, things involving like the procedure of reading, like the mechanics of how like not all cues necessarily have to line up in order for him to draw a conclusion. Things like that. He didn't address that. He didn't address the more immediate things. He kind of just made up things like, fuck it, I guess I'll address it now. Like he made up this idea that someone told him that I said that someone assaulted my sister. Like I never made that argument. She never made that argument. I have no idea where you got that. So he just spent a massive portion of the video attacking a point that nobody ever made.
He told me directly on camera, like he didn't want to talk to us on Facebook. You know what I mean? He was like, well, you know, unless you want to talk about like my opinion of well, he didn't say his opinion. It is his opinion. But like, unless you want to talk to me about first gear, like I don't want to talk to your ass at all, because like that's like apparently in his eyes like the only thing that matters.
Butthurt, dude.
Like it's like And by the way, we were talking about First Gear. He didn't respond to the stuff we were talking about in First Gear. He fucking like he responded to some of it, but like he fucking ignored a bunch of it and spout out all this like moralistic like crap, such as like and he also like such as like I think people have like pitchforks and stuff are raging. People lost their shit. Why don't you just address what we're fucking saying?
Right. Instead of doing this
instead of like whining about the fact that people have like legitimate reasons to be upset at you. So then on top of that,
he was dismissing, like he was like saying, you guys are all like coming at this from emotion. It's like, why can't we just talk about the theory? It's like,
we're college snowflakes.
Yeah. It's like, well, maybe they're a little sore about the fact they've been lied to for so long, and that you don't seem to be apologetic about that at all. You don't think that's a legitimate reason to be pissed?
Yeah.
All right. What's up?
That was the my comment. That was my main argument is that you didn't show any signs of apology whatsoever, and then that's what just fucking he must have like blew his lid, and then he just went off on me for like a fucking hour. Yeah. He just can't seem to process that his actions have consequences and they affect other people. It just doesn't. I don't think it registers at all.
Right. Okay. So he goes on to kind of talking about like what I got out of Pod Player, and then he says, if you believe it, then the gift I gave you is the gift of being able to see side cheeks, and you can see it on side, and you can see how it's connected with da. Okay. But I already had the ability to tell when people look like me. That's nothing new. What you gave me was misinformation about what that actually means, and no, I'm not very happy about that. So then he goes on to say, you can test that this happened, but I don't. Irrelevant. You're not living my experience. Okay, so here's the thing. You don't get to write my Yelp review of your cult. Like, I'm the only person that has a valid opinion of what my experience was. So you don't just get to be like, oh, the theory didn't work for you when you tried to apply it? No, that's not true. How the fuck would you know? Yeah. I tried it. I applied it. It was poison. I needed to vomit it. So then next he makes this point that's like, you have to sacrifice to get truth or something. And basically what he's saying, he's kind of like addressing how I was saying that I invested a lot in this. I lost a lot of time. I lost money. I was set back majorly in my life, but it's like, okay, so to address this, you got to sacrifice truth and get truth. Or all right. He says, okay, maybe this idea that you have to sacrifice to get truth, sure, maybe that's true, but you lied early on. You told me that I was building a career in this, and you knew that that was a vulnerability of mine. You knew that I didn't really have an established career, and you strung me along with this idea that financial freedom is just right around the corner when you had no plan whatsoever of actually achieving this. You lied about what you could actually see. You lied about the level that you could actually see it at. And you lied about going in a monetary direction with Paul Blair, which, by the way, I'm not saying like, oh, you should have cashed in because it's now bullshit. My point is you actually did manipulate a vulnerability. You saw that I had this need in my life and you're like, I'm going to put this idea in his head and I'm going to fill it for him when you fucking knew you didn't have a plan for that. So that's literally conning. That's con artistry. You are tricking a person into investing confidence in you that you did not deserve to have, that you didn't deserve to have invested. To spend exorbitant amount of time, money, and labor on you with promises that you had no plan whatsoever of keeping. It took you until 2014 to finally admit to me that you had no idea what you were doing early on. And by then, I was already set back years. I had so many nights of panic attacks where I told you the source of my fear was that I had no real way of supporting myself, and I don't seem to be going in that direction. And at no point did you ever actually recommend that I withdraw the time that I'm spending here and actually take some time for myself to get my shit together. You happily took absorbent amounts of my time, constantly giving me trivial bullshit to work on, like memorizing lines of theory that have been made irrelevant since then, or backtracks in theory. I had to will myself away from you in order to get my shit together. You were literally a huge time sink in my life, filling my days with trivial bullshit. And even at the time that I decided to stop meeting up in person, you were still trying to get me to make music for you. Like, you were still trying to take more from me after that. And yeah, at that point, I'm like, fuck this. Enough is enough. Sorry, guys, I kind of lost my place. Oh, okay.
Oh, you're good.
All right, so then he goes on to say, if spider hands are a thing, then I'm pointing out something more wondrous that connects all Zionine throughout history. Okay, sure. Oh, no, wait, actually, I already read this. I addressed this, sorry. All right, so next he says, if I'm dishonest, why would I do purifications and put them on camera? Okay, so technically, you hid your purifications from the public for many years before you actually started making them public, as it would damage people's confidence in you. Once again, you had a conflict of interest. Then there was a point in time where you were actually blaming Jiley for your misreads. You were saying she was the one who was making the reads. And so you gave her responsibility for something called the shiny shard. And the point of that was to deflect blame for misreads onto her. And by the way, this is not speculation. We literally discussed this in plain English.
Wait, what's the shiny shard? I'm actually just kind of interested.
The shiny shard was the old name of the virtual village. Yeah, the Excel sheet of reads. Used to be called the shiny shard.
That does actually sound kind of familiar now.
Yeah, and it kind of like played on Shiny, so like the Shiny shard too. And we had a thing where like I had a collection of like rebuttals, and so we called it the Steely shard. And so basically he kind of positioned Jilene with authority. So he gave her authority so he can deflect his mistakes onto you, in the same way that he gave me authority so I can be the one who handles pushback from critics and stuff like that, so he doesn't have to. So like that karma, I'm the one who's kind of enacting that, or racking up that karma. So yeah, this is something we discussed in literal words, the deflection of reads onto Jilene. Like that is not something I'm making up. We've actually talked about that. So then even when you did go on camera and talked about your misreads, it was only you embracing an inevitability. You can't possibly have purifications and then hide them from your people. You have to acknowledge it because you have no choice. And going on camera and facing them head on actually gives you control and allows you to spin your reasoning for missing them in whatever you want. So technically, it's less about honesty and it's more of a power move, I would say.
Yeah, he's not really humble about like how he does this. He's not like responding to people's questions. He's just he literally makes like a bunch of changes all at once and then goes on the spiel about like why he made all those changes. But he's not like changing a sample every day. You know, I'll bet he thinks about changing samples like every fucking day. But for some reason, the samples, the misreads, they just seem to come out all at once. And they come out all at once with like this extremely long-winded explanation about like why they are the way they are. That leads me to, I mean, I don't know for sure, but that leads me to believe that he's actually like deeply afraid of like how people are going to respond to that. And he needs to feel like he's in control of like what people's reactions are to those changes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it allows him to basically make the first impression instead of allowing other people to make the first impression. So it's actually just a very strategic move. It doesn't necessarily mean I should revere you as this exemplar of honesty. Okay, and also, secondly, the reason why I can't give you credit for honesty is because the whole concept of purification is bullshit. That word is propaganda in the same way calling torture enhanced interrogation techniques is propaganda. You're calling changing your opinion purification, which implies it's returning to a more pure state. But there's been so many times where your answer literally just toggled between two answers. How do you call that a purification? If something is just going between two answers, how can you argue that it's returning to a purified state?
Yeah, he's implicitly saying that it's an upward progression in the word purification. He's saying it's better, but he actually has no proof that it's any better than it was before. He's just saying it's better. He's just, I say it's better, therefore it's better. That's literally what he's doing. And he has no fucking proof for how it's better in any way. All that we know is his answer changed, and that's it. And then he gives a subjective opinion about like why it changed in his head. He admits it's in his head. Like, I mean, you can look at something and you could say, oh, that's in your head, but it isn't just in your head. Somebody could look at that, like if it is actual research, somebody should be able to determine, with certainty that is the answer, and another person should be able to reach the same conclusions based on the same premises. But we don't know what our premises are. These are just our like subjective like instruments. Like even if we could reach 100% certainty, we don't know what the premises are that are actually leading to these conclusions. It's just our subjective opinion of like what emoting actually looks like, what it actually means. Because you could look at a person and interpret emoting to mean so many different things. I could look at somebody's eyebrows and say that's emoting. I could look at somebody's upper cheeks, even on logic-based motives. Like I can look at your cheeks and say your upper cheeks are emoting right now. Like, and there'd be no way to determine like whether I'm right or wrong. We don't right or wrong because like we can't determine the premises because there's not enough specificity in in the methodology. It's not really a scientific methodology because it doesn't specify what you're supposed to do and what actually leads to the conclusions that you say that you're supporting.
Yeah. Okay. So more points about that. By the way, can you guys hear me? Okay, if I kind of try and whisper a little bit, I need to rein myself in because I might be waking up the neighbors.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
there's
a little bit of static, but I can still hear what you're saying.
Okay. Okay. So next, every time he purifies, he tends to claim that like, oh, I found all the answers and I'm done purifying, when you've never been done purifying. Even after the recent Xeni purification, you still claimed, I think I found all the Xeni, when you couldn't possibly know that. You still make nonsensical claims like Xeni guys don't really do comedy, even though you shouldn't be making any claims at all that influence your own or other people's assumptions of mojos when you admittedly are not even at data bedrock yet. I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Next, he says, I'm not sure what I should do in that regard. As he's acting like I'm checking on being honest. Like, how dare you admit that you're wrong? Like, that's not a fucking point. So it's like, I'm not sure what I should do in that regard. Well, you could start by not claiming you have a perfect lens when you obviously don't. You could start by admitting that everything in the theory is actually up in the air and nothing should be treated as facts, considering the fact that you have no way of actually falsifying any of these claims. You could start by not starting a cult. And, you could start by actually doing research. Next, he says, it's a hyperbole to claim that I'm massively unethical. No, it isn't. You've lied on many occasions on what you and the theory are capable of. Only now are you backpedaling and actually being honest about these things now that we are backing you into a corner. You demand that people treat you with authority that you've never earned and buy into the notion that your word is the highest authority on what your relationships with the people in your life are. And then you dig your claws into these people's lives by not just reading them, by asking them to send you their life bubbles so you can read their family and give shaky reads on their entire lives, fundamentally affecting all of their relationships with bullshit data. It completely fucks you up. I've been there. This kind of thing fucks you up. I've experienced. You're putting unfounded claims like same-mojo relationships don't complete you and therefore are lower than inspirationals, without regard for whether it's even true or not. Completely forgetting about the fact that people are basing their lives around this stuff, and it's probably fucking up the relationships with it like it did mine. Next, he says, I'm a true believer in the mojo phenomenon. Who cares? Why is that relevant? You've already demonstrated that your confidence is irrelevant. You've demonstrated that you have delusions. It does not matter what you believe. It matters what you can demonstrate, and you can demonstrate the motu phenomenon in any meaningful way. Also, it's a problem that you're a true believer. That's not a good thing. You shouldn't be a believer at all. You should be a researcher. If I told Darius that he's a Xeni, not a Naiji, aren't I being dishonest? Or if I told Darius that he's a Xeni and not a Naiji, aren't I being honest in that I admitted that I'm wrong? No. You're being dishonest because you're not admitting that your read on him as being a Xeni also might not even be right. You don't have data bedrock. None of your reads are technically firm. If you wanted to be honest, you should have simply told him to withdraw his belief that he's a Naiji, not giving him something new to believe in that you know might be subject to change later on. You shouldn't be giving public reads of people, period, if you're still in the middle of doing research that fundamentally changes your answers every month. You shouldn't be telling people to trust in your opinion when you know your opinion is based on uncertain conclusions. He goes on to say, at no point did I try to tell someone an untruth knowing it was an untruth. Okay, first of all, you did say that you tell people plain, obvious untruths, like you read at 100% just to delude yourself into having competence. I don't think that's much better. But also, really, you've never told a lie. You've never told something that was untrue, knowing that it was untrue. What about that thing you just did where you said that you saw Jilene when you know that that word didn't exist? You couldn't have possibly have told her that. You had to have told her it was FI. Do you actually think that's true? You've claimed the theory didn't come from Young. And I can confirm with my experience, and we can confirm that we've been amassing a case on this. We have mountains of evidence that supports that that's wrong. I'm pretty sure you know that. I'm pretty sure you know that's a lie. Also, you've claimed to have plans at the early stages of pod layer that you never actually had. And only admitted later on that you had no idea what you're doing. So you're admitting that you knew that you didn't know what you're doing, yet you still lied about knowing what you're doing. All right. Okay, so next so in the email, I made a point that the idea of inspirational relationships or any kind of relationship hierarchy has never been fact-checked. And it's something that would be very easy to fact-check. There's a site called Who's Dating Who where you can actually look up relationships of public figures. That's the cool thing about using public figures. You could use sites like this, and technically that is data. And then he responds that he didn't look into it because he just didn't have time to get around to it. Okay.
So some serious priorities there.
Yeah, so it's okay to make the claim. It's okay to put the idea in people's heads that they might be in a fucked up relationship. So that's more important than actually looking into whether that's true or not. I was just getting around to it. Yeah, I made a ridiculous claim that like people are basing their lives on. I'll check it later. Okay, then he says, you said that it is bad that I had a firm idea of relationship hierarchies, but that opinion has changed over the years. Okay, what years exactly? Like last year, are we talking? Because it definitely wasn't more than like 2 years ago. Because as long as I can remember from being around you guys, you outright look down on people that are in same-moja relationships. And this attitude can be seen on the underground temple, on the forums. People collectively, under your influence, look down on people in same-moja relationships. You would see people speaking like this on the forum all the time. So at what point exactly were you going to take down the videos where you claim that inspirational relationships are the top of the hierarchy? At what point were you going to announce that that the other that you experience in your head might not necessarily be your inspirational? When were you going to announce that? At what point were you going to change the name of inspirational to something less biased? Because even the name itself suggests it's the better one. And that nobody else can inspire you, which is absurd.
There's actually no evidence that the powers even like inspire each other. You just said they inspire each other without actually showing why they do or how they do. It's just the whole like the peak pathway, like even within the context of like you assume so if we just assume like the powers are true, that like the conscious powers and the hierarchy is true, there's zero evidence about what the fuck the unconscious even is. Like, you know what I mean? It's like there's zero evidence like a person even has all 8 powers, because there's no cues associated like in that's actually been documented you know, for the unconscious powers. So
yeah, he just took what like John Beebe, you know, the one of those Jungian people who came up with a full cognitive function hierarchy. He basically kind of just took that and just put his own names on top of it.
Yeah, I actually remember reading a little bit about John Beebe before I became popular, and that does sound pretty familiar. I think like he's like it's more of like a negative thing or something. I don't know exactly, but
when
like,
I first came on Popular, I'd already heard of that model, that way of thinking. Yeah, it definitely wasn't new. Okay, next. Well, not next, still moving on with the same point. Okay, so this thing that you and Jolene in private have been talking about, hey, maybe this inspirational hierarchy thing isn't such a good idea. That's a very important revelation that you just revealed that people should know about. People are basing their lives on this, or basing their lives on this at the very least. And when were you going to share that with everybody else? Because it's still definitely on the website, still definitely in the ebooks. So also lastly, so you're saying that you're now thinking to yourself like, oh, we don't know, it could be same mojos that are higher in the hierarchy, could be inspirationals that are higher in the hierarchy. Where are you getting the hierarchy? Why is there a hierarchy at all? How is there any evidence that anything is over anything?
Yeah, as soon as like you push him on something, he just gets like wishy-washy about it. But then like oftentimes, and then what'll happen is like if something does change, it'll change in like this like arbitrary way. Like there won't be any evidence, any scientific empirical testing.
His eyes isn't looking at the right side of the brain; it's looking at the right side of the psyche. Yeah.
Or he'll just leave it exactly the same, also with no justification or premises behind it. So yeah, it's
Yeah. So then he goes on to say, I grant you that these things need to change, but I had more important things to do. How much time would it have taken you to just withdraw your claim then in a video and say, I'd like to withdraw a principle of inspirational being the most supreme, and more research needs to be done on that? How much time would that have taken? Why wasn't that in any of your videos until now? So again, this is a clear sign of conflict of interest. You're not willing to be forthcoming until you're backed into a corner because you don't want to damage people's confidence in you, which you never earned in the first place. Again, that's the epitome of dishonesty and being unethical. So yeah, he goes on to say, I was going in the direction anyway, like as I'm going in the direction of kind of being more skeptical of the inspirational model. And yes, that was being hidden up until now. That's not transparency. And also, you've done nothing to make any updates, the ebooks or anything like that. It was me that had to tell Akides not to take serious this information. It wasn't you. It should have been you. He goes on to say, like, you can be skeptical if you want, but you look like a Zionee to me. Which one? Which one specifically? Because I cannot possibly look like all of them. There's way too much diversity. So you can pick a handful and say, I look like that handful, but you could never claim I look like Zionee.
Yeah, and it's like it's easy to find like an example of a particular mojo that looks more like you than someone who is actually that particular mojo. Like finding a different mojo than you, finding somebody within that pool that looks very similar to you, and then comparing that to other people within that pool. It's very easy to find examples of that where like you actually look closer than they do.
Yeah. And also, like, okay, so you found a Zionee that looks like me. What's her point? Why should I wait and be impressed by that? You don't need to tell me that I look like people and act like you just did something impressive for me. I can do that for myself. Also, what about the times then when people of two different mojos look like each other? For instance, Licky Lee and Lady Gaga. One's an Ejai, one's a Xeni. They look almost exactly the same. Why isn't that relevant?
Yeah.
Okay, I love when he does shit, like when he attempts to make these arguments. He says, try to make your cheeks look values based. You can't do it. And then here's the problem with that argument. The only pattern of opinion that matters is yours. So even if I say, no, my cheeks do look values based, you're just gonna say, no, your opinion's irrelevant.
I mean,
so
basically what he's saying is like, you know, you can't make your cues look different than what they are. But it's like all that might actually mean is that you can't make yourself look significantly different than what you look like, right? It doesn't actually mean that that he's right about what you look like. It just means it's hard to change what you generally look like.
Yeah, it's the fallacy. If things were different, then things would be different.
Yeah, like of course.
I can't edit the gene that makes my face muscles emote in a certain way or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Whatever the hell you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so people of two different mojos look alike all the time. Why isn't that significant? Like, if me looking like another Ziny is that significant, then why isn't something like Licky Lee and Lady Gaga looking alike also significant in the opposite direction? So he seems to be making the argument that the cues can't be faked here, and that's an argument that's been made many times over. But no, if that were true, misreads shouldn't happen. We now know that they can happen, which means cues definitely can be mistaken or are subject to change later on, which means the concept that the cues can't be faked is just a nonsense concept in that of itself, because the cue, you like to make the argument the cues will always be what they are. And yes, you'll always look like the way you do, and I don't know, maybe you'll change in certain ways, but your perception changes. And therefore, yes, the cue, you can be fooled, obviously. Your perception is constantly changing. So then next he says, I'm always seeing the Ademus look on you. Maybe that's because I am the Ademus look.
I mean, like you're the closest like Ziny like he's had in at least recent years, you know, quote unquote Ziny, whatever that means. But so I mean, like, and it's like exactly what you said. Like the people who are like, especially you and Jilene, like you two are probably like the epitome of like Ziny and Jiny, just because
you guys the templates of what he made.
Technically, Thomas never read me. I told him I was an INTP, and he took my word for it.
Yeah, so you're the template. You're You're the Ziny prototype.
Right. He took my word for it without actually having a virtual village database to actually know if that's true or not. Okay. Also, like, I'm not contesting that I do or do not look like Ziny. It's a trivial point to make. I'm contesting whether it's worth believing in that means that I work a certain way or not, which there's no evidence to support. Okay, next he says, I got panic attacks. And it's like, okay, that's nice, but it's not really relevant. Having panic attacks doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're aware that you're standing on a house of cards, and that house of cards might just collapse on you, which it did. So your fear was definitely warranted. Next he says, I'm not acting. I'm not arguing that you're acting. Once again, you're making this weird point that says, I believe in what I'm saying. Fine, but that's not really relevant. I'm arguing that you're deluded and dishonest, which you've shown yourself to be many times over. Whether you're acting or not is besides the point. I don't believe you don't believe in what you say believe in. If anything, I think it's a problem that you believe in it at the level of the fervor that you do. Next, he goes, Jilene said, I shouldn't apologize because I'm trying to do good. So here's the problem with that. Your idea of doing good isn't good. You actually believe it's good for people to regard you as the highest authority and trust your word over their own instincts, over what they actually feel and want in life. That's not a good thing. You believe it's good for people, for you to feed them with uncertain information and encourage them that they buy into this information as if it's just as good as natural law revealing itself, which it clearly isn't. And only now are you being kind of honest about how shaky your relationship claims are. You weren't doing that before, but people were still basing their life decisions on that. All right, so next he kind of addresses the thing that I said where, okay, so like I brought up in the email that it's like, I've seen him off camera and I've seen him on camera. And he's like, what am I like off camera? I'm just like a normal person. I just like eat sandwiches and like take naps and stuff like that. And what I'm saying by making that point is, I've seen you not trying to front. I've seen you not trying to act. And yes, I'm sorry, but you very much are playing a character on camera. You are very much playing this like I'm a hero. I'm on a journey. It's a performance every time you go on camera. I've seen you when you've let your guard down. I've seen you when you're not trying to win people's confidence. I've seen the natural you. And therefore, I know that the new you, as it were, the one that doesn't appear to just fly off the handle as often, I can see that you've gotten better at playing a reasonable person on camera, but off camera, you're very much still the same person you've always been. That's what I mean when I say I know him both on and off camera. Next, he says, I can be overly demanding and controlling. You left out manipulative, you left out narcissistic, and you left out emotionally abusive. Next, he admits to smoking weed and watching hentai. Cool, not relevant. Nothing to be ashamed of, but not relevant. It's kind of weird. He just starts admitting things.
It's fucking weird non sequitur.
Yeah, it's not like there's anything wrong with it, but it's just really weird to just put that out there on camera, dude. Like the public does not need to know about that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I guess weed, I mean, that's not that weird to put on camera, just like this casual vlog or whatever, but like the hentai, like on camera, dude, like, you know, people are just gonna like roast you and make fun of you for that. I mean, I mean, you kind of had it coming if you're kind of gonna just like put that out there to like everyone, dude.
It became a meme instantly, I think, like right after he put that out.
Okay, so then next he says, this Ademus, as in the one that's represented in the email, is cloudier than the Ademus I know. Then when he's making sound points, you mean when I'm defending you? You mean I'm cloudier than when I'm unconditionally supporting you? Oh, okay. So I'm cloudy when I'm being honest in a safe environment. But I'm not cloudy when I just completely surrender to your will. Okay, I kind of see where you're coming from. So next, then he says, and this is a great point, you didn't see me ever say I'm making this up. Are you a fucking moron? What? Of course I didn't see you say that. Why would you say that? Why would you say a thing knowing that my trust is riding on you? Why would you say? Also, you know you don't have to verbally announce everything you do, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, like,
why is saying I'm making this up a prerequisite to making something up? All right, next he says, and I'm actually almost done here, I'm starting to wrap up. He says, I started talking to typologists and where they were making errors. No, you took and modified the entire MBTI model. You even used the words at first. Next, he says, correcting corrections is not making things up. I guess referring to purifications. As you go, correcting corrections is not making things up as you go along. Right, but you're not actually falsifying your reads. That's impossible. You're just giving out more opinions and calling it data. Then doling out these off-the-cuff explanations based on no substantial evidence for why you missed those, or why it makes more sense now in their new read. That's making things up. Next, he says, you're saying you're a co-creator. Yes, I am. I helped write the power flows, especially design. I'm not going to take more credit than I deserve. I'm not going to say that like I wrote all this shit, but I can definitely take credit for being a co-creator. Like you did actually give me a lot of creative freedom in writing these things. We bounced ideas off of each other.
And I wonder, like, if the reason he doesn't think that you're a co-creator is because he thinks that like he has and deserves to have like the ultimate authority. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like I never lost the ultimate authority. You know what I mean? Like it kind of sounds like he's coming from this position that because he's the ultimate authority, that means like you weren't a co-creator when you actually were. You know what I mean?
Yeah, also, like, a lot of stuff that I said by dismantlings or just correspondence with people is stuff that wasn't in the theory. It's stuff that I was kind of just bringing out as in, like, my interpretations or how it makes sense to me. And so I was actually disseminating things that didn't really come from him, or that was my take on things that came from him. And I was endowed with the authority of the theory instructor, so I absolutely had the right to make those claims. Yes, I'm absolutely a co-creator. So then next he says, I kind of just summarized his words, but
yeah, he doesn't give Young any credit either. He says he's the like supreme founder, you know, and he does not like to give him credit. You know, he doesn't like to say like, because someone could make a legitimate claim. You know, didn't they kind of find that out first about, you know, the 16 configurations and the functions and the you know, but wasn't that actually found before you? You know, that hypothesis. You know, and aren't you just kind of proving their hypothesis right? You know what I mean? But he doesn't like to admit that. He likes to claim it's all his own. So.
It's got to be all him.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, next, and this is kind of the final 2 points, is then you said you were, okay. So his whole point was, you said you're a co-creator of the theory, and then you said you were suppressed by it. No, I didn't actually say that I was suppressed by the theory. It did lead me astray, but I was suppressed by you. That has nothing to do with the theory. I was, like, my entire existence being around you was a just muted version of me. Thomas, you don't know me. You've never actually met me. That's the thing. That wasn't, I don't know if I can say that that was me. A me that actually has to constantly hide what I actually think because I'm scared to set you off. That's not suppression, where I actually have to hide my feelings and just bottle them up inside and be like, let's tiptoe around Thomas's field of eggshells. That's what I mean by suppress. It's not the theory, it's you. Next, so then he says, you're taking ownership points and then taking victim points. No, technically you gave me the ownership points when you made me theory instructor. And I'm not taking victim points because of the theory. I'm saying you're a dick. So that's my point. It's got nothing to do with, I created a theory, the theory victimized me. I'm not saying a theory victimized thing. I'm saying it was terrible working for you. It was one of the most, it was the most oppressive experience I've ever had in my life. It was hands down a toxic environment. There's really no way to get around that. I'm significantly happier now that I'm away. So that's my spiel. That's my response. We can go anywhere now at this point.
Wow.
I will say that the more recent response to me, I don't really feel that much of a need to address just because nothing of real value is said. Once again, so like you accuse me and my sister of like making up a thing that like you assaulted her, but it's like that doesn't ever happen. She's not saying it happened. I'm not saying it happened. No one's actually saying that happened. So your response to me was predicated on these weird red herrings and straw men. So I actually don't really feel compelled to acknowledge or to address anything that's in that response. It's kind of just a crappy video.
Well, what? So why should his memory be reliable anyway? Since he's constantly playing the amnesia card, we could just say, well.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, like all of a sudden in these videos, your memory came back. What happened to having amnesia? That was a thing that happened. Now all of a sudden you're getting memories back. Like, I'm sorry, I'm calling bullshit on this amnesia thing. I think that's a way of you kind of just getting a remembering the past free card, you know? So it's like, so you can justify not telling people about these massive holes in your backstory.
Yeah, he could just explain away any unflattering detail involved in his work. Oh, right. I don't remember. something bopped me on the head several years ago, and I can't remember shit. You know, I have disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's definitely something really weird about claiming that, like, he claims he has a strong understanding of where the theory actually came from, but he also claims that he has, like, serious memory issues and amnesia. So if you have amnesia and you know you have serious memory issues, how do you know you didn't just forget a bunch of stuff that influenced the theory? How do you know? You don't remember. Like, what if you just don't remember? Like, has that thought not occurred to you? Like, that possibility that you might have forgotten, that your amnesia may have gotten to you. Like,
yeah, like you can't on one hand take this, oh, I'm suffering from amnesia, but also, oh yeah, I totally remember where the theory came from. I was having this conversation with Jillian and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
you just undermined your own credibility.
It's very easy to, like, make a story, like have a story in your head about what happened and not actually know exactly what happened if you have severe memory issues and, like, there's, like, huge gaps in memories and stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, he won't admit to being like, dude, like, one night I hit the vape and I was like, dude, what if we take, like, the MBTI and make, like, a sci-fi expansion pack version of it that'll save the world?
It could have
I mean,
totally
maybe that
happened.
might have very well been how he.
Yeah,
but I don't remember it. never happened. So when someone makes a bullshit claim, an interesting thing to ask him is, can you pinpoint an exact time in your life when you didn't know that A equals B? And then can you pinpoint what made you realize that A equals B? What was the point? You know, because there is an event that happens where you just, you actually gain a piece of knowledge. So if that doesn't exist, it just, it means he just makes up details as he goes along.
Right.
Which is, I think we've established pretty much what he does.
Right.
Yeah, and so now he's, something that was interesting talking about is he's now taking a slightly different route with the theory where he's not actually trying to train people anymore. He's saying that this is all for future humans because he doesn't think that current humans are good enough to understand it. But little does Thomas know that he is indeed also a current human, and he has no idea how good anybody else is at reading people, and he's just claiming that people aren't good enough. Well, how are you good enough? How do you know that you're good enough, if you're claiming that everybody else isn't good enough? Like, does that make any sense whatsoever?
Also, what is the value of something that, like, this is actually a point that Alcides made, and so I'm kind of reiterating his point, but what exactly is the value of something that, like, you have to 100% commit yourself? You can't have a job, you can't have meaningful relationships, you have to be a shut-in and just pour collages over your eyes in order to actually have command over this information in any sort of meaningful way. Is that really a worthy trade-off?
Yeah, how does it actually help people?
Yeah.
Like, you claim that people get all these great insights. I don't feel like Adimus and I have been doing this for years, and we don't think we've gained any grand insights about people. Like, isn't that kind of a red flag that people who have been doing this for years, have been practicing your quote unquote methodology for years, don't think they've actually learned anything practicing your model?
Right, because he's been making the point over and over that, like, you got to put in the hours. You got to embrace the grind. We used to say that a lot. You got to embrace the grind of Muja reading training. And we're saying after that grind, there's really not much at the end of the rainbow. There's just confusion and misconceptions.
It doesn't produce any kind of productive outcomes in the real world.
I feel like I would have learned more about people just living my life. Like,
just learning about them.
Just fucking roll. Just roll with your life every day. Just
actually interacting with people, which Thomas apparently doesn't do very often.
I mean, Ben, how many years you spent a few years probably, like, walking around your college campus, kind of trying to see the world through, like, Thomas vision? You were sort of trying to live that life, right?
Yeah, I was.
I mean, I just feel so bad for you. You guys are young. He caught you guys when you were teenagers.
Yeah.
So he plucked you, before you ripened off the vine, and he was, like, molding you and shaping you. So these young years, these are the years where you're supposed to have fun fucking up and learning from your fuck ups and having fun fuck ups. And that's what I did when I was
this was definitely a fuck up, and it was definitely something. I mean, but yeah, I agree with you. It's like I could have done like.
But I'm saying those. It's supposed to be fun fuck ups, not not being a
like
slave.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
I felt that whinge a few years ago. Like, what the? I'm significantly older than like you and Mitchell. Like, I was just like, what the fuck is he doing to your guys' lives? Like, you, Mitchell, and Glenn, you guys are all pretty young.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, I was just, I couldn't imagine my life when I was that age, doing like what you guys were doing. Yeah, I don't know. It's just
I feel like my life would be pretty different if I just like never came across my life. Yeah. I mean, I probably, the thing is, like, I probably would have been, I'm not the kind of person who like gets out much and stuff. So maybe I wouldn't have like gone out and like gone to a bunch of parties or anything. But it's yeah. But yeah, I mean, I could have had like a lot more fun, just not like, I don't know, slaving away hours and like hangouts and shit. It would have been a better life.
Right.
I mean, not to say I've wasted my entire life. It's only 5 years, but
yeah,
5 years that's a chunk, So
yeah. Did any of you guys want to say anything about your personal responses or the responses that you got?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, like in mine, he responded to like some of the points I was making. He kind of ignored a lot of them. Like, he didn't talk about like he actually never mentioned unfalsifiability in his 1 hour and 20-minute video they made to me, which I think is kind of bizarre, because those were like that was like one of the biggest points that I was making in Human Quality, was the unfalsifiability. He focused more, in fact, far more, on trying to make me try to prove some sort of point that I'm like shaken up, like that
he kept hitting this fear point, like, oh, you guys are just scared.
Yeah. He's like,
he's done that in the past, dude. So much.
Yeah, that's his MO.
You're being plagued by doubt demons. I remember him doing that shit to you, Ben, like a couple years ago. Like, you were saying, oh, I have some doubts about this and that. And he's like calling them doubt demons, and you need to extinguish them. I mean, that's just fucking with your mind. It's just it's terrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it really is, because you're saying that like these voices in your head, if they're validating my shit, they're good voices. If they're not, they're bad voices. You gotta extinguish them.
Some of his rationalizations were just on things going on within the community. Like, I was like complaining to him about some of fucking like Wendy's outbursts. There were many of them, and he's like, oh, you got to deal with your like overmodulation issues and blah blah. I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do with me voicing a complaint about somebody else's behavior? Like, he used the theory just to come up with any kind of stupid rationalization of anything you present to him that he finds to be inconvenient or it clashes with his agenda.
He'll make up theory and then insult you with it. Like, there's no evidence that overmodulation exists, but then it's like, oh, you need to handle your overmodulation.
Yeah, I'm overmodulated because I'm not a fucking carbon copy of you, Thomas. Yeah, right. Fuck you. I hope you're watching this. Fuck you.
Yeah, and like, this is in a different direction, but like, on the topic of like exposing things publicly that definitely should not be exposed publicly. Like, in that hour and 20-minute video, he read off basically. He quoted like a bunch of different things, but he basically read off an email that I sent him that was like highly personal, highly emotionally charged, and I literally said that I was crying in that email, and he just read it off to the public without asking my permission at all.
He doesn't care.
Yeah, that just communicates.
He has no fucks to give.
Yeah, that just communicates to me like that he doesn't care about my privacy or like what I'm experiencing right now at all. Like, he's just like, and the worst part is he was using it to drill down his point that I was shaken up, right? Because I in that email I was showing that I was very, shaken up, and this was like
so he was using it to undermine you.
Yeah,
to undermine your credibility. Yeah.
He was using that to, hammer down a point that I was shaken up. Gee, really, dude? Like, if I'm saying that I'm crying, I don't know what to do with my life, like, you think I'm shaken up by this? Like, Jesus Christ. it's just like, I mean, I hope you proved your point there, like as if it wasn't obvious already. I mean, people like even in human qualia, like people could kind of tell that I wasn't like taking this in a completely. I was definitely feeling, you know, a lot of shit, you know, because like the way I was, the messages that I was writing and stuff. So it was kind of obvious, right?
Yeah, one thing I'm really thankful for is I never shared any personal details about myself with him.
Same.
I never sent
Neither did I,
family
actually.
members or
Yeah.
I kept that shit. I didn't, you know,
That's
I
why,
never trusted him fully to begin with.
yeah. That's why
I didn't want to share.
at this point I don't feel a lot of like, by saying the things that I am and kind of coming clean about a lot of this, I don't have a lot of resistance where it's like, oh no, I'm hurting my friends, because it's like, I'm not convinced that we were friends, and I'm not convinced that Thomas is capable of making friends. I feel like he thinks you're a friend only if you support him, only if you invest in his product. If you don't, he doesn't really give a fuck about you. Like there's no evidence that that me, you know, even when he saw that email, Ben sent me his initial response, and his first response was literally, "He's weak. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle the shit." I think his exact words were, he couldn't handle like the ebbs and flows, or the I don't know, the tides of wrangling natural law. And it's like, no. I'm saying you lied about a bunch of shit and emotionally manipulated people like crazy. It's not that I can't handle myself. It's that you outright fucking lie to us. Period. That's the discrepancy. I think that's a little more relevant.
I just get the impression he doesn't see any of us as individuals at all. We're just implementing his, you know, artificial universe that exists inside his head.
That's actually also why I don't believe that like I can ever feel like we were friends, because like I don't think he actually knew me. I think he was always just projecting onto me. He was projecting this idea of like, oh, that's my space ant, or Fritz, this character from Martian Manifesto that he's told me that he projects onto me. So it's like, you weren't really interested in knowing me. You were interested in kind of giving me an identity, which was really just an extension of yourself.
I feel kind of like disgusted right now, because like it felt like there was kind of like this thing where like it feels good when Thomas projects like good stuff onto me, you know what I mean? It's like I kind of feel like there's this it creates messed up relationships between people, you know?
Yeah, it's called love bombing.
Yeah.
You ever heard of that? Love bombing?
Yeah.
Where he basically, if you're behaving in a way that's useful to him at the moment, he'll just like, he'll use his charmingness to say all kinds of wonderful things about you that don't mean anything. He's just doing it just to, you know, he's pouring poisonous honey on top of your head, basically.
Yeah, to make you want that validation or want to work for that validation.
Yeah. So you spent
He actually told me that I like so when I left. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, Gabe. I just want to quickly say.
Oh, no, that's okay. Finish.
Yeah, like in his most recent video, he actually told me that like I think you are really hungry for validation, and that's why you're making those posts in Human Qualia, is because you just want to be validated.
Yes, we were all virtue signaling. That's what he accused us all, is virtue signaling. Yeah. He's incorporated new newspeak into his lexicon.
Also,
college.
He's not virtue signaling. Like, aren't you the guy who's saying that you're the hero saving the world, and that your ethics, that your code of conduct is unprecedented, and it's how? Yeah. Like,
I think he's virtue signaling way more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And by the way, like Gabe, you were like weren't you like the first person to like like become like woke about like like SJWs and so forth, and like he's claiming you're like the college snowflake, you know,
that's why I was laughing so hard during the video, because of like, you're calling me this. I'm like, just bitch, I've been hip to this shit for years. Like, who the fuck do you think you're talking to?
Also, who is a bigger snowflake than Thomas? You're literally the epitome of a snowflake.
He's the grand master of snowflakes. Right. Like, everything about him is. That's why, you know, he had the fucking sci-fi alien speak, is because his version of typology had to be the most out there, special snowflake, different than, like, a central part of his fucking ego is just being different and more different and unique than everybody.
Right.
By definition, that's a fucking snowflake.
Right. And also this idea that the entire world needs to be his safe space and that everyone needs to tiptoe on these eggshells. Oh, we can't fuck with his fifth year.
Yeah, can't fuck with the shiny baby fifth, you know, the shiny baby that looks like a fucking turd, you know, from South Park, the Christmas poo. That was in, I forget which ebook that's in. But yeah, the shiny baby looks like a fucking piece of shit. If you look at the picture. Mr. Hanky, I think that was that was the Christmas poo from South Park. I'm like, dude, just I don't know who designed it. I don't, you know, I don't know who I'm insulting for designing that, but it just that's what I saw, and I think there might be some subliminal messaging in there. I don't know. So that's like the spiritual apotheosis of his entire whatever the fuck he's doing. And at the very end, it's just a turd. I don't know. That's
okay.
That's
actually the ugly artwork that actually kind of brings me to a point that I wanted to bring up. Like, okay, Jiley and Thomas, how come you guys never financially invest in this product that you super believe in any meaningful way? Like, all of the major financial investments or labor projects were done on other people's backs. It was Nija, me, Ben, and if I'm missing anyone else, I'm sorry, that have actually done most of the footwork and even put forward financial investments for you guys. Nija was paying for the website at first. Why do you guys just sit around waiting for people to do work for you? Like, do you guys not have plans of your own? Do you guys not have any ideas? Like, why isn't it worth it to actually invest in your product in any meaningful way instead of just waiting for people to do work for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, Thomas, he like works like all day, and I guess, I mean, Jiley, I mean, and the thing is, like, Jiley is like paying the bills. So I guess that's kind of what's going on, is like Thomas doesn't have to work, so he could, you know, he's doing like I guess legwork, quote unquote, of like I don't know, like looking at samples and changing them and
watching YouTube all day.
You know, and he does. I mean, he does like add images and stuff, you know, and he does like a shit ton of work when it comes to that. But it's like, you know,
I'm not saying he doesn't. I want to be clear about that. But I am saying when it comes to investing in the infrastructure of their model and like expanding and stuff like that, they're always waiting for people to volunteer and do work. And it's like, why don't you guys just take proactive action and throw money at this? It's not like they don't have money. Jiley pulls in 6 figures.
Yeah.
It's not
this is actually
a point, but it's just a thing that's really fucking weird, and it actually doesn't show you guys have very much confidence in this model.
This was bothering me for at least 3 years, actually. Like a while back, I was thinking, like, why does it seem like they're not taking any kind of concrete steps to promote and expand this in any kind of pragmatic fashion? You know, put work into the more work into the website, actually trying to do outreach, all that kind of stuff to, expand the infrastructure. It just seems like no priorities putting into this. And I got the impression that Thomas was basically just hiding in his fucking room all day watching, doing more purifications and more reads and whatnot, and just not putting any mind into any of the other aspects of his project except the bullshit, pointless things like making his fucking students drill into their head his fucking talking points and make videos demonstrating that. You know, it just seems just all this just pointless shit. That's what kind of when I pulled back was I just saw like it seemed like the project wasn't going anywhere in any kind of productive direction.
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating. Like if being on the team like that and just watching him do all this stuff that's like just pulling back, like he says constantly, oh yeah, one day we're gonna go out and we're gonna like, you know, show the world what we've got. But for the next several years or so, we have to keep building ourselves up. What does building yourself up even mean? Like, you know, what is, you know, memorizing beats and looking at images of people like without actually doing any scientific research actually do for you, you know? And so there's that in itself. But then on top of that, like, if you're not actually going out and like talking to people, aren't you kind of just like wasting your time? Like, how are you going to actually grow and improve your model if you're not doing that? You know,
right? It just stagnates.
You know,
especially when no meaningful opinions are allowed to be let in other than his own.
Yeah, like you should want there to be like competing like theories and stuff, but I don't even think he wants that. He says he's open to being challenged on that, but as soon as somebody says, you know, I don't think I'm seeing what you're seeing, then he's like, oh, your Mojang is fucking shit. I'm doing the best research in the world. So I guess you're not actually open to other people's criticisms then. You just want to tell people that they're shit, that they don't know how to be. You know, you're not being open to criticism at all. You're blowing people off and telling them they're dirt when they don't see things your way. You know, it's terrible,
you don't unconditionally surrender your free will to me? Okay, fuck you then. You suck.
He just calls people stupid with no proof, you know, or no actual argument actually explaining what's right.
Well, the insultathon in those 25 videos against all of us, it was actually really just kind of a repeat of what you guys were doing in the PSA period to everyone who, you know, gave any kind of pushback. It was just really, it was just him doing it this time, but it was a repeat of the same fucking talking points. The exact same thing, the hyper aggressive, you're fucking shit. I'm the best. At
the end of the day, all he has is provocation. And that's what the PSAs were. They were a provocation campaign. Many times was it said there is no such thing as bad publicity. It was really just poking beehives. And I feel like that's how he thinks he shows power, by being like, look at how many videos I can output and just drop them at the same time. It's like, great, but you're not actually saying anything meaningful in any of these. You're just attempting to kind of bully people by being like, look at how much articulation I could just overwhelm you with.
Yeah, the bad publicity. I mean, that's what brought me in. I was one of the haters in the beginning. I was leaving like nasty comments on various videos. I don't think it was on any of the Podlayer channels, but it was on other channels of people you were trying to, you know, PSA. And that was my original connection. And then, you know, so if it wasn't for that, you know, I would have never heard of Podlayer at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just a.
And then of course I sucked other people. I sucked a couple other people into it, you know, eventually, because of that initial, you know, publicity. I feel bad about that. About, you know, Mike and Carolyn were two people who probably the most devoted mental energy into this.
Yeah, it's a good thing that those two people don't actually, you know, really follow Podlayer anymore. I think Carolyn. I mean, I'm pretty sure she, you know, agrees with what we're saying.
Yeah.
Although she's a little bit like nicer. She's a little bit. I mean, she's a little. You know, she's not like expressing like anger and stuff. But I mean, she doesn't actually believe in this. Same goes for Mike.
Well, yeah, he got out.
Right.
Yeah, he actually left a long time.
He got out a lot.
That's good. It's a good thing. Yeah.
He got sucked in pretty hard.
Yeah.
And he was, you know.
Yeah, he was upset with he was actually upset with the Hangouts because he thought he had the feeling that they were pretty stiff. Like he couldn't actually express himself, because they were just dominated by what Thomas wanted to do. Like he couldn't talk. like Mike like wanted to talk about like sports and stuff, and like he felt like he couldn't do it because the hangouts they weren't actually hangouts. They were just like Thomas dominating the conversation and talking about and doing it what he wants to do, you know.
Right, and us taking turns reading names off collages.
Yeah.
That's why I started the Facebook group, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I started the Facebook group so there could be a place to have calm, like casual, off the cuff, and not just be, you know, it completely dominated by his agenda.
Right.
It's kind of funny. Like they were doing the Sunday session last night, and they were going through the objective and the subjective samples.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't actually have, like, when I was making the objective, like the energy field buttons, I didn't actually have images for those. So I just slapped some yin yang symbols on there, and they're like still there. So they're probably going to be for a very long time.
Just nearly forever. Yeah.
It's just yin yang symbols on the buttons. It's like, it's funny. And that app isn't even like, it's definitely not polished. There's like bugs everywhere and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
he's
like,
not going to know what the fuck
works,
to do with it.
You know?
No, it's gonna be like how the website and the forum are kind of just deteriorating.
Yeah, I feel like how are they even going to maintain it? Like they don't have anybody who can actually maintain the website. They're like, what if
they're not going to pay anyone to do it, and that's kind of my point about like they make no financial investment.
Yeah, and like the
other
website,
than paying for hosting fees and stuff like that, but not really meaningful investments.
Because like eventually, I mean, what could happen? Like the website is pretty vulnerable. I mean, generally speaking, I wouldn't like say this on camera or anything, but the website is it should be obvious. Like for like I'm not a very experienced programmer. Like that website is the first website I've ever built, so it should go without saying that website has a lot of security holes that people could easily exploit. They could like exhaust like the resources of the website.
If anyone cared about it, if anyone cared about
pretty easily, like
I think the danger that happening is practically nil, because with the way things are going now, he's not going to be able to find anyone who's going to give two shits. The only reason why he had any audience in the first place is because of typology.
Right.
You know, without that, there would have been nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So unless he fucking goes back into typology town and like pretends it's MBTI again, he's not going to get a new crop of people.
Right, and even if he does, I still don't think he's going to get a new crop of people like that.
I'm not exactly the kind of person that'll probably get attracted. Like somebody who's actually willing to like write software.
Yeah.
Also,
you got pretty lucky on that one. Like, because like nobody else would do. Shit.
Not to toot my own horn or anything, but like, you don't have me anymore making this theory sound more logical than it actually is, because I think that was kind of important. Very many people have said that they actually came on board because they liked the way that I explained things, and he doesn't have that anymore. It's just him now. So good luck with that.
Yeah, he doesn't have the logic crutch anymore.
He doesn't have other people making him look more credible than he actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So all he has now is his retarded rationalization hamstring. Right. That's the term, the way that he took issue to. Like, and he kept repeating over and over in his response to me. But that's kind of like how his brain works. It's just like a fucking hamster just running through a wheel, you know, looking to...
Every now and then stopping to talk about how great it is.
Like you could totally say like, wow, that hamster is a little something kind of going on with that hamster there.
Yeah, so without you, it's not gonna work. What got me hooked after seeing the bad publicity is that Demas, I went on INTP forum and basically just binge read all your posts on there, and that kind of got me. I found the theory that you were espousing to be really fascinating, and I was just like, I rationalization hamstered my head. I was like, well, you know,
and what's funny is because the MBTI is like such garbage. Like it was pretty easy to like bring people in that way, because you're like, here's a piece of shit. Here's a piece of shit with aliens in like, you know, quote unquote research. So it's just like, oh, well, that looks better, so I'll just go over there. You know what I mean? And a lot of people saw through it.
So you don't have to prove the theory to them because they've already bought into that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what makes it an easy transition.
So yeah, it's easy to
the theory. And if they've already bought in, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really, MBTI did the initial sales pitch for Thomas on pretty much every case of people who got involved. Without that, no one could make any fucking sense of what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a great learning process. I remember years ago trying to explain like Jungian cognitive functions to people who never heard MBTI, and it's just like the eyes would delay. They didn't know what the fuck I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you can just casually converse with the average person because it just doesn't. It's so abstract and detached from reality to begin with. It's, you have to fucking geek out on it to really even want to learn about it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm starting to think like are there any people who have actually come in like that didn't already know about typology like before they came in? Like I'm trying to think like
no,
or the MBTI.
No.
I can't think of any examples. I feel like anybody who's seen our videos, like that wasn't from typology, was probably like, "What the fuck am I watching?" And then they just it's like,
it's just
in 2014, we attempted like outreach and like we went to a place and like handed flyers to people, extremely poorly designed flyers, and like 2 people liked the Facebook group from those flyers, but they never really invested any time. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so unapproachable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's no, just from a marketing standpoint, it's just like the worst pile of shit you could possibly do.
Right. Also, like our outreach pitches were weird. Like doing outreach is like some of the most embarrassing shit because we would literally just throw jargon at them that they have no possible way of knowing what we're talking about, and they just like uncomfortably look at us like, okay, cool, and then be like, yep, and then walk away and like tell ourselves that we accomplished something.
I remember Thomas like one time when they were doing the you guys were doing like the coffee shop thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas one time said like, oh, and I think this was like at a point where like he was actually literally approaching people like strangers on the street and shit. He talked about like how there's like this niche eye, how like wanted to approach, and she gave him like a grimace or something, and like a really kind of disgusted look. And then Thomas was talking about how that made him feel like shit, because he didn't know why she reacted that way. But I'm guessing it was probably because she saw him like approaching people, that way. It's always he was doing, and she just didn't want to be a part of it. And it's like that's just how people react to this stuff.
Right.
It's like it's just a massive turnoff. It's just
it doesn't emanate credibility. And actually, there's one thing, a point that he did make in his later response to me, the 10-minute one, that I would like to address. And then, so he saw me on the Facebook group mention that I always made sure my videos had like cooler graphics and effects than the others. And yeah, I did say that. Although, like, he acts like I'm such an asshole for saying that. It's like that was an ugly thing to say. Is it really an ugly thing to say? Because, like, why is it bad to think presentation is important? Like, I didn't want to turn people off right when they look at it. And that's what was happening with the other videos, because you did this fucking weird shit where you just had these random effects coming in and out. Like, why would people be into that?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, for a while, like literally a couple weeks, I think, we were... maybe a little longer than that. Thomas and I were talking about doing vlogging, because like Glenn, Mitchell, and myself were like around level 10 with vlog voicing, and after level 10, you're supposed to actually do vlogging. I don't know why it takes until level 10. Oh, right, it does, because you have to like memorize like fucking hundreds of beats, before you can do that, I guess.
Right.
To get fully indoctrinated into the theory. But yeah,
it's ever proven itself to be relevant.
But yeah, so So like when we were talking about like actually doing vlogging, he explained, you know, he talked about very thoroughly that like he wanted to really get into video editing. He really wanted to get into like presentation and making himself, like making him feel like that he could actually really participate in presenting himself really well on camera, video editing. So he clearly like, you know, is saying there that he cares about this. So saying that your video editing was like, you know, was very good, or what exactly did he say about your video editing exactly? It was
or that my effects, but basically he accused me of being petty for saying that. And to be honest, that was even never a relevant point. I was kind of just like, I just thought it was funny. Like I never actually made that to be like a super important point.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly,
true, though. I do think presentation's important. Yeah, I absolutely think that. I don't want to be dismissed out of hand for no other reason than how my shit looks.
Yeah.
Just because it obviously looks ridiculous, which Podler's presentation does.
Yeah, like why do you have to be ashamed about like putting like a really good effort into your presentation in like, because I mean their presentation is obviously really bad and yours is obviously better. So pointing out that yours is better when everyone knows that your presentation, like their presentation is shit, I think is actually something that should probably be brought up. Like I mean, it does highlight that there's kind of like a gap there at the very least. So
what was kind of funny is that they actually insisted that they never really insisted on this on me because I kind of insisted on doing my own editing and stuff like that. But like for instance, when Agris volunteered to do video editing. Now the thing about Agris is a professional. He's like an actual professional videographer. And so when they told him to like use this like shitty software and these effects, he's just like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Never mind.
Yeah, I actually paid for Corel. It was such a I would never like. And then what I found out is like I actually preferred to do like the clipping, like the video editing in like other alternatives because I just found like clipping the videos to be easier in other programs. So I guess that was kind of a waste of money. I don't know. It's like and things that the program has like some fancy stuff, but it's like I would never purchase that if it wasn't for the fact that this is the software that they use. So I should, and they're still using like they're using like Microsoft Office products, and it's like there's nothing wrong with using Microsoft Office, I guess, but it's like I don't know, it's another like paid it's another like paid software package that they're using because it's easier for Thomas to use. Like they use software that's easy for Thomas to use, and that's why they use it.
Yeah, they have to reduce quality to just operating at his level, which is not a high level. I don't know if you guys noticed, he's not the most technologically literate.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of expertise there. So was he actually
I would argue that technological literacy is actually based more on kind of superstitious thinking. Like he's scared to death that technology is going to overmodulate him. Like his fifth gear gets rattled anytime he's around technology, or anytime that like he's obligated to use technology. That he's
like the concept of modulation.
Well, it means because he has to slow his shit down and actually learn how to fucking use it, which means taking his mind away from his fantasy world.
Yeah, in some ways that's kind
of. I mean, if he wants to.
In some ways, that's kind of just how you.
That's called.
Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
It's called fucking life. You sometimes have to take your mind away from things you don't want to be doing at the moment, like learning how to do something sequential, you know, how to use a certain tool, you know. You're not going to fucking enjoy every minute of it, but it just seems like anything that takes his mind away from his fantasy world is just some massive inconvenience that's way beneath him that needs to be just fucking, you know, put off onto somebody else.
Yeah, he makes people do like technical stuff for him because he doesn't think he can do it himself, which is kind of like self-serving because the only way you get comfortable doing anything is to actually buckle down and do it. So he admits he's afraid of technology and logical sequencing, but then he has other people do it for him, so he doesn't have to be burdened by it. It causes him to continue to be afraid of.
Right.
You know, it's like why I mean, I understand people have their strengths and weaknesses, but it's like, it's just people victimize their weaknesses way too much. I feel like, and I mean, I feel like in general, and I feel like he's definitely claiming victimhood when it comes to these things. But he's also like this person who's like, oh, you got to save the world, you got to overcome your your weaknesses and be strong.
A hero, right?
But he's clearly fucking weak when it comes to this. When it comes to like actually having the courage to do really really basic things.
Also, he's really big into quasi-deathing, right? Quasi-deathing is when you kind of kill the former you, or you're reborn in something bigger, or you challenge yourself, you challenge your belief. Then why are you scared to death of criticism? And it's like, of course, he kind of makes the case that he's not, but it's like, if you were actually confident, you wouldn't just video blast us and then drop off the forum. You'd stay on to have a dialogue. So you seem to be adamant about keeping yourself from actually quasi-deathing while saying you're really into quasi-deathing.
Yeah, and that's yeah, that brings up an interesting point where like he just, I mean, and I guess that kind of ties into him like seeing us as dirt, like like basically he doesn't want to talk to us on Facebook because he doesn't think it's worth his time and energy because he thinks he's on this like grand mission. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think it's bizarre, like to say that you're open to criticism and you're open to having a dialogue when you actually aren't open to having those things.
Right. No, you're open to people agreeing with you. That's not quite the same thing.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, when Thomas and I were talking about going out and doing vlog voicing, we were talking about actually going to people and talking about controversial topics. Our plan, or what he was planning actually, was to go out and just find people online and ask them questions about controversial topics. And those people had no connection, would have no connection to Podler whatsoever. They would have no understanding of first gear or have any agreement with it, because they didn't know about it. And yet he said that he was willing to go out and talk to people about controversial topics. But then this happens, he makes a video in response to me saying that he doesn't want to talk to us because we aren't in agreement with him on the first degree of Podler practice. So when he goes out and he does vlog voicing, he doesn't care what your beliefs are. But when it comes to people criticizing him, oh, you have to actually agree with me on this or we can't talk. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Well, that's a safe part of his safe space programming.
He flip-flops and is highly inconsistent in so many different ways. And he uses the excuse that his theory is constantly changing and evolving, even though those changes aren't in response to actual evidence and actual testing.
Yeah. I probably have to call it about now. Does anybody, do any of you guys have anything you want to throw in or get covered before we?
He's very pompous. He has talked in a very pompous way for like years now.
And hasn't lost the pomposity.
Yeah. It's
like he likes to say that he's humbled by data, but then it's like still this smug where it's like, well, I guess I'm just at a higher level than you.
He like almost all the videos I looked at, he was just like yelling at us and calling us snowflakes. And I'm just like, are you? Is this like your true character?
Right.
I mean, yeah.
One final thought of my own. If he wanted to really like start a successful cult, he could have picked much more accessible subject matter to foist onto people. Yeah. I don't know if you ever thought about that.
Spirit forming. You don't have to prove spirit forming. It could just be a belief system.
Jungian rituals and spirit forming that he could have had. But actually, that's a good thing because if he would have had a cult, he would have just ruined a lot of people's lives.
So. Yeah, that wouldn't have been good. So, thanks.
Yes.
God's marketing.
Yeah. Thanks for your confidence. You know,
Right.
you saved some lives.
Yeah.
All right, I said my piece.
Okay.
Looking pretty good too.
Well, there you have it.
All right.
Thomas, enjoy that.